What if the only way to avenge your slaughtered family was to survive the most painful ritual on Earth? To inherit the skills of dead warriors, Arhan is told he must literally consume white-hot metal blades. With no other choice, he bites directly into a glowing, molten sword, letting the magical fire burn his body from the inside out. If he cannot digest the steel, it will destroy him. Let us go back to the beginning to see how this tragic journey began. We start in a dark, glowing forge where molten metal crackles with intense heat. It looks like someone is preparing to craft something serious. Arhan stands before the flames with a completely blank face. He looks like a man who has lost everything and has only one thing left on his mind. A white-hot blade sizzles as it takes shape. The heat is unbearable, but he does not even flinch. His eyes suddenly flare with absolute rage. Whoever ruined his life is about to have a very bad day. He lets out a furious scream as he hammers the metal. The fury of a fallen noble is being poured directly into this blade. This is where our story truly begins with the blackened swordmaster. Let us find out how we got here. We flash back to when Arhan was just a kid standing with his father in front of a grand portrait. His father tells him to remember this moment well. He explains that as a member of the caravan family, there is a legendary history he must never forget. Even though they currently live in a remote village far from the capital, their family was once legendary. 200 years ago, their status was unmatched by anyone. His father talks proudly about how they once had a knight known as the God of War, along with supervisors respected by the king himself. He ruffles little Arhan's hair and tells him that everyone used to treat their family with absolute respect. They were known as the invincible protectors of the realm, and this magnificent sword is the proof of their legacy. The portrait shows the legendary founder Liam Caravan standing proudly with his blade. His father places a heavy hand on his shoulder. He tells him that one day he will take over as the head of the family. He squeezes tighter and reminds Arhan to always live with the proud blood of the caravans flowing through his veins. Kneeling down to look his son in the eyes, he tells him his ultimate duty is to regain the family's lost glory. The scene transitions to a peaceful rustic village bathed in the warm glow of a sunset. The duty of the caravans weighs heavily over this quiet land. A gentle breeze rustles through a massive field of golden wheat. We fast forward to the present day where a grown-up Arhan is working hard harvesting wheat with a simple sickle. He admits his father's grand stories are probably nothing but tall tales. Talk about a massive reality check. He tosses a stalk of wheat aside. He thinks about how common it is for disgraced nobles to cling desperately to their past glory. Standing in the hot sun, he sighs at how ridiculous the legends sound. If they were actually a legendary family, they would not be stuck living as poor village landlords. He smiles and chats casually with the local tenants, asking where he should stack the next pile of harvest. He definitely does not act like some high and mighty noble. Looking down at his worn-out hands, he realizes just how many inconsistencies there are in his father's tales. Wiping the sweat from his face, he thinks about how the grand founder in the portrait does not add up. The portrait depicts an intimidating warrior hanging in their dusty old hallway. He points out that the founder looks absolutely nothing like him or his father. Plus, that supposedly ancient sword looks way too clean and sharp to be hundreds of years old. Even worse, he actually did his research. He spent hours digging through historical records. Not a single history book in the entire kingdom mentions anyone named Liam Caravan. Standing on a hill, he concludes that the whole legacy was just a lie made up to give their family a little bit of pride. Suddenly, a voice snaps him out of his deep thoughts. One of the cheerful villagers yells out that it is time for a snack break and warns him to hurry before the warm bread is gone. In the distance, Arhan sees an elderly villager coughing while another watches over him with worry. Arhan smiles warmly. Honestly, he does not care if his family's history is fake because the people here genuinely care about him. He steps forward into the golden fields, completely content with his quiet life. He walks happily toward them, just loving the simple, peaceful community he gets to live in. This is the exact kind of life Arhan wants, just keeping things simple and peaceful. But of course, in a manhwa, peace never lasts long. A dark shadow looms over his tranquil days. A drop of blood falls into a pool of water, sending ripples of dread through the air. Unaware of the impending tragedy, Arhan hops on his horse and waves goodbye as he heads to the neighboring town market. He asks the villagers if there is anything they need and offers to pick up some fresh apples for his friend Kun. Kun laughs happily and thanks the young master for being so incredibly thoughtful. Arhan also remembers that a local girl has a birthday coming up, so he promises to buy her a pretty doll. He winks playfully and jokes that since he will be their next lord, he has to keep track of everything. The villagers wave him off cheerfully, wishing their beloved young master a safe trip. Kun runs alongside the horse for a moment, smiling brightly as he bids him farewell. As Arhan rides off into the sunset, the golden fields rustle peacefully behind him. The villagers chat among themselves, praising how different Arhan is from typical greedy nobles. One of them even jokes about noble ladies trying to steal him away. They decide to quickly finish up the rest of their work before it gets too dark. But out of nowhere, a sudden blade slices right through the air and splatters blood directly across Kun's face. The peaceful atmosphere instantly shatters as a brutal attack catches everyone completely off guard. One of the older village women turns around in absolute horror to stare at the sudden bloodbath. She stands frozen in shock, completely unable to process what is happening. A massive spray of blood showers over the golden wheat field. It is an absolute massacre. A cold, silver-haired warrior walks calmly through the field, muttering that this entire land must be erased. The terrified, elderly villagers look up at the mysterious intruder while trembling in fear. Close-up of a villager's eye dilated with pure terror as the killer steps closer. With a swift and ruthless motion, the intruder raises his sword and slashes downward under the red sunset. The silhouette of the killer stands tall as the field burns around him. Red streaks of energy slice through the air as the villagers are mercilessly cut down. The killer's pale, cold face is illuminated by the splatters of fresh blood. He does not show a single shred of remorse. He turns his back on the carnage and walks away while declaring that everything must be erased. Sometime later, the doll and apples Arhan bought lie scattered in the mud under the dark night sky. Arhan returns to find his home in absolute ruins, with his face pale from horror. He stands in the middle of the field, surrounded by the lifeless bodies of the people he cared about. Suddenly, a bloody hand reaches out and grabs his shoulder from behind. It is his elderly butler who quickly pulls Arhan into a desperate embrace and begs him not to look. The butler holds him tightly, weeping, as Arhan stands frozen in shock. Arhan tries to speak with tears welling up in his eyes as he mutters that he must be seeing things. The butler covers Arhan's eyes, crying uncontrollably as he shields him from the gruesome sight. The butler grits his teeth and reveals that a monster came to their village. The killer had arrived with a single mission to completely erase the caravan family. We see a flashback of the brutal attack. The killer slaughtered everyone in their path with terrifying ease. Wielding his blade with complete indifference, the man appeared out of nowhere like a ghost. In a matter of just 10 minutes, he ruthlessly took the lives of every single villager. The ground rumbles as buildings are destroyed, leaving the entire village in smoking ruins. The killer stood calmly amidst the falling debris, completely unbothered by the devastation. He coldly muttered that he was simply following orders, as if he had not just destroyed an entire community. Back in the present, the butler holds Arhan tightly under the cold moonlight, weeping for the peaceful life that has been erased forever. Arhan runs up to the caravan family mansion at night under a full moon. The mansion looks silent and ominous. Inside, the mansion doors are wide open, and there is blood splattered everywhere on the tiled floor. Arhan walks slowly through the mansion, looking down at the bodies of the servants lying on the floor. He gasps in absolute shock, with his face pale and eyes wide from horror. He covers his ears and cries out in sheer panic as the reality of the situation hits him. Suddenly, a voice calls out his name in the dark hallway, causing him to look up with tears streaming down his face. Through the darkness, his mother comes running toward him, giving him a sudden glimpse of hope. She grabs him tightly and cries out in relief that her son is safe. She hugs him close, weeping and whispering how glad she is that he was not hurt. He grips her shoulder, but something about this embrace starts to feel terribly wrong. Over her shoulder, Arhan's eyes widen as he stares blankly into the room. He looks down to see his father lying in a pool of blood on the floor. His father is leaning against a wall, heavily wounded, with blood covering his clothes. We learn that the tragedy has only just begun. The silver-haired swordmaster who wiped out half the caravan territory is shown. Surprisingly, he did not harm Arhan's parents, but only left them with a message. The swordmaster told them that if they wished to live, they must leave this place with everyone by dawn. The father had screamed back in despair, demanding to know why they were being targeted when they committed no crime. The killer stood cold and silent in the dark woods, ignoring the father's cries. The swordmaster simply walked away, leaving them with cold, incomprehensible words. His glowing red eyes showed zero emotion as he vanished. After he left, the remaining villagers packed up and abandoned their homes in a hurry. The tenants and villagers began leaving the territory under the rising sun, terrified for their lives. Meanwhile, Arhan's father sat alone in his dark study, crushed by the immense weight of his responsibility. He muttered to himself, desperately clinging to his identity as a great guardian of the kingdom. He swore to the heavens that he would defeat the great evil, while his helplessness as a lord turned into a full breakdown. Back in the present flashback, his mother looks at Arhan with a sorrowful but gentle smile. She tells Arhan that she has already instructed the butler to prepare a carriage for him to escape as far as possible. Arhan protests, yelling that she and his father must come with him too. But she sadly shakes her head and explains that his father cannot leave this place. She knows her husband will stand his ground until the very end, wanting to face the enemy as the true lord of Caravan. Arhan begs her to reconsider, crying out for them to all leave together. She points to the portrait of the legendary protector and tells Arhan the harsh truth. She admits that all those stories are nothing but lies and filled with fake history. She grabs his shoulders and begs him to promise her that he will never pick up a sword in his life and that he will survive no matter what. She looks at him with tears in her eyes, pleading for a promise. She gently caresses his cheek, telling him to just live a normal life for himself. Suddenly, the butler rushes in, announcing that the carriage is ready. She pushes Arhan toward the butler, pleading for him to take Arhan away before the killer returns. The butler drags a crying Arhan away as he desperately screams out for his mother. His mother watches them go with her face filled with quiet resignation and sorrow. Arhan tries to break free of the butler's grip, crying out into the night. The carriage speeds off, leaving his mother standing alone in the clearing. Her final words echo through the trees, telling Arhan that she loves him. We see a flashback of the study door opening. The father is standing in his dark room, preparing for the end. His mother enters the study with books scattered all over the floor. She approaches her bleeding husband, asking him to stop suffering alone. She wraps her arms around him, offering comfort in his final moments. She promises to be with him until the very end. Back in the carriage, the butler is driving them away through the dark woods. The butler tells Arhan that he knows how painful and devastating this is, but he must endure. He describes the silver-haired swordmaster as a natural disaster that normal humans simply cannot overcome. He keeps a firm grip on the reins, telling Arhan he must accept this tragedy. He adds that his parents only wanted him to live on, which is why they sent him away. Suddenly, Arhan jumps out of the moving carriage, leaving the butler in complete shock. He rolls onto the dirt road, getting his clothes torn as he scrambles to his feet. He starts sprinting back toward the mansion through the dark forest. He realizes he cannot leave his parents behind like this. He runs as fast as his legs can carry him, refusing to just run away by himself. He clenches a crossbow in his hands, thinking that even if the swordmaster is called a calamity, he is still just a mortal man. Arhan remembers the deadly poison he spent the last month preparing, hoping he can shoot the killer with it. He approaches the mansion, completely determined to protect his family. But as he enters the courtyard, he freezes in absolute horror. His eyes go wide as he stares at the flagpole in the center of the yard. His face loses all color as a drop of sweat runs down his blood-smeared cheek. The corpses of his parents have been strung up on the flagpole, hanging under the blood-red sky. The killer stands below the flagpole, muttering about how foolish they were. The silver-haired swordmaster stares cold-bloodedly at the hanging bodies. He notices Arhan standing there and asks if he has come to embrace death as well. He tells Arhan that he had shown them mercy, but it seems they did not learn. Arhan lets out a shattered, primal scream of pure agony and rage. Tears and sweat stream down his face as he stares at his dead mother hanging above. Seeing his mother's pale, lifeless face completely breaks whatever sanity Arhan had left. He aims his crossbow at the swordmaster, screaming that he will kill him. The swordmaster looks on with complete indifference as Arhan prepares to fire. Arhan pulls the trigger, launching the poisoned bolt. The arrow flies through the air, but the swordmaster easily blocks it with his blade. The crossbow clatters to the ground, completely broken. Arhan falls to his knees, gasping for air as the despair takes over. He clutches his throat, coughing and trembling in absolute helplessness. The swordmaster steps closer, looking down at the boy who is not even 18 yet. He tells Arhan to consider himself lucky because he will not take his life today, ordering him to go and drown in his despair. He warns him that not a single trace of the caravans can remain on this continent, and if he ever tries to continue the bloodline, he will find him and finish the job. Arhan is left kneeling in the dark, weeping over his pathetic weakness. He holds his mother's lifeless body, repeating how utterly pathetic he is. He cries out in agony, unable to do anything but watch his family get destroyed. He lets out a devastating scream that echoes through the burning ruins of his home. But suddenly, a strange blue light begins to glow around him, and the family sword starts to float. A powerful voice echoes in his mind, telling Arhan Caravan to show some respect. Arhan looks up in pure shock, with tears freezing on his face as the blue aura wraps around him. The grand portrait of the founder glows with a blinding blue light. The legendary founder himself, Liam Caravan, appears before him as a glowing spirit, calling Arhan his descendant. 1 year has passed since Arhan buried his family. During this time, he has dedicated every waking moment to preparing for his revenge. The man who slaughtered them is considered the pinnacle of the continent. A transcendent being who is supposed to safeguard the kingdom's peace and destroy evil. Master of the 10 Swords, Carlos. That is the name of the legendary man who stripped Arhan of everything. Arhan has researched endlessly, trying to uncover the secrets of why Carlos targeted his family. Only one thing is certain in all of this mess. All the innocent lives of the caravans that were so emptily extinguished will never return. But wait, what is this sudden light? Did Arhan finally go mad from dealing with this unsolvable problem? He blinks, staring ahead in complete disbelief. A blinding blue light begins swirling directly in front of him, manifesting from the family portrait. A deep, commanding voice echoes through the room, telling Arhan to show some respect. The glowing spirit of his ancestor reveals himself addressing Arhan as his descendant. What Arhan thought was a total lie has actually appeared right before his very eyes. The legendary ancestor is standing right there. He remembers reading about severe psychological trauma and how it can cause vivid hallucinations. He clenches his fist tightly, trying to figure out if he is actually losing his mind. Sweat drops down his face as he looks up at the towering, glowing figure. The spectral warrior stands tall, telling Arhan that he can sense the immense turmoil swirling inside his young heart. The ancestor asks him if he is afraid that he lost his mind, or if he is simply shocked that the legend has actually appeared. Arhan takes a sharp breath, realizing this situation is far too real and vivid to be a mere illusion. He musters his courage and asks the spirit if he is truly the legendary founder of their family. He is staring at Liam Caravan, the strongest swordmaster in their family's history. If this really is the legendary hero from his father's tales, Arhan wants to know one thing: why did he only choose to appear now? He screams out in pain and frustration, demanding to know where this invincible protector was when his family was being slaughtered. He glares at the spirit with eyes burning in fury, questioning why he waited until they were all dead to show up. Liam Caravan looks down at the boy with a calm face, explaining that he needed to confirm something first. He tells Arhan that revenge is a grueling, dark path that no one should ever start unless they are prepared to abandon absolutely everything. The ancestor notes that despite Arhan having a trivial and hopeless talent, his resolve was absolute. For a whole year, Arhan trained alone, swinging his sword until his hands bled, holding on to a hopeless dream. It was that unwavering will, burning with pure hatred, that finally summoned him. Liam simply explains that the answer to his question is incredibly straightforward. The ancestor states that the hatred in those young eyes has finally reached the perfect depth he was waiting for. Furthermore, his own patience has reached its absolute limit, and his bloodlust to tear apart the killer is overflowing. He reminds Arhan of a fundamental truth in the history of this continent that has never once been disproven. He points out that Arhan already knew this truth, which is why he foolishly swung his sword and vowed revenge anyway. He bluntly tells the boy that even if he trained for his entire life completely alone, he could never hope to reach the killer's level. He explains that a swordmaster is a transcendent being existing far beyond the normal category of human. It is a supreme realm that even geniuses cannot fathom, and among them, Carlos stands at an unreachably high place. Even back in Liam's era of war, there were very few with that kind of monstrous skill. He reiterates that no one in the current generation has the power to kill him, and as time passes, Carlos will only become even greater. Hearing this, Arhan's heart sinks. He knows the massive gap between them is wider than the ocean. He stares blankly, realizing just how impossible his quest actually is. His eye dilates with rage, refusing to accept that the monster who took everything from him is going to be celebrated as a hero. Arhan grits his teeth as his mind flashes back to his utter helplessness when his throat was crushed by the killer. But Liam changes his tone, declaring that he will help the boy bridge that impossible gap. He promises to help him become a blade sharper and stronger than Carlos himself, so that he can judge the murderer as a true caravan. He looks at the boy with glowing blue eyes, ready to pass on the ultimate family secret. There is only one method to achieve this, and it is a soul path that only a caravan is capable of walking. The ancestor commands Arhan to devour his sword, calling him a descendant who has inherited the steel blood. Bro is having a full-blown mental breakdown right now. Did this glowing ghost just tell him to eat a sword? The furnace in the background bursts with violent crackling flames. A glowing, white-hot sword sits inside the intense heat of the forge. Liam reveals that the caravan bloodline is actually mixed with human and dwarf blood. Arhan looks towards the glowing furnace as the sheer heat waves wash over him. He stands before the blazing fire, looking at the glowing steel sword waiting for him. Liam explains that this unique legacy originated from himself, since he is a dwarf half-breed. Although the physical traits of dwarves do not show in their descendants, a special ability has been passed down through their blood. That unique ability is to literally consume blades. By eating the sword, they can absorb the memories and power of its previous wielders, allowing them to stand tall as a legendary family. Arhan is completely bewildered, thinking that eating swords to inherit power sounds absolutely absurd. Sure, dwarves are famous for working with steel and fire, but eating actual swords is a whole different level of crazy. However, Arhan knows that truth can only be proven by results, and at this point he has no room left for hesitation. He glares with absolute resolve, demanding to know how to consume the sword. The old ancestor smiles, slightly pleased with the boy's determination. He instructs him to simply heat the sword until the blade softens enough, and then chew and swallow it. Yep, he is actually going to do it. Arhan thinks to himself that he might be trapped in a nightmare or possessed by a ghost, but he does not care. If there is even a sliver of a chance to get his revenge, he will take it. He opens his mouth, preparing to bite down on the white-hot glowing blade. With a wild shout, Arhan bites directly into the burning metal. His mouth is flooded with molten heat and he chokes on the burning steel as fire erupts around him. He groans in agonizing pain as his fingers claw at the air while the heat burns him from the inside out. The fire completely consumes his body, turning the room into a blazing vortex. Arhan screams in absolute agony as his throat burns while the magical fire surges through his veins. He stands in the middle of a massive pillar of fire radiating heat through the entire mansion. Debris and sparks fly everywhere as the magical sword's power is forcibly absorbed into his body. He collapses to the ground with smoke rising from his mouth and skin as he struggles to breathe. He writhes on the stone floor while his body undergoes a painful supernatural transformation. Sweat and blood drip from his face as he grips his head with the sheer pain almost driving him unconscious. In his agony, the traumatic memories of his family's slaughter flash before his eyes. He sees his parents hanging on the pole with their faces pale and dead under the moonlight. The cold, mocking words of Carlos echo in his mind, reminding him of his absolute weakness. The memory of his crushed throat and his mother's final tears fuels his dying resolve. With a surge of newfound power, he reaches out his hand and tightly grips the glowing hilt of the sword. He grits his teeth with sparks flying from his mouth as he forces his body to endure the burning metal. The room shakes violently as the sword's energy is completely integrated into his soul. Arhan declares with absolute conviction that even if this process kills him, he will succeed and become the swordmaster who puts Carlos in the ground. Arhan wakes up in his room gasping for air as birds chirp outside the window under a clear morning sky. He bolts upright screaming as his heart pounds against his chest. He catches his breath, realizing with wide eyes that he is actually alive and did not burn to death. He looks down at his completely uninjured hands. The agonizing pain of chewing and swallowing that blazing hot steel was definitely real though. He wonders if yesterday's bizarre event was just a crazy dream, but fortunately that does not seem to be the case. If it had been a dream, there would be absolutely no reason for only the empty sword hilt to remain on the floor. A familiar voice speaks up, telling Arhan that unlike his utterly weak body, his mental strength is actually quite commendable. Arhan looks up to see the blue spectral energy swirling around the room once more. Liam Caravan's spirit floats down, noting that even among their ancestors, quite a few gave up because they could not endure the searing pain. The ancestor asks Arhan if he finally believes his words now. Arhan looks at him in complete awe, speechless, as he realizes this definitely is not a hallucination. He places his hand firmly on the floor, ready to show his respects. Arhan kneels down formally, greeting the founder of his family. But Liam stops him, telling him to call him master instead of founder. Arhan immediately agrees, bowing his head and addressing him as master. He then looks up and eagerly asks about the great power his father always spoke of. He reminds his master of what he said last night about consuming a sword to grant its wielder power. However, Arhan checks his body and notes that nothing actually feels particularly different. He stands up looking a bit disappointed as he wonders why he does not feel a massive power-up. Liam sighs and clears his throat, admitting that there is actually a bit of a problem. Arhan blinks in confusion. Liam explains that his original plan was to feed Arhan his beloved sword to instantly elevate him to the realm of a swordmaster. However, because the caravan blood has thinned out over generations, Arhan's ability to digest the power within swallowed swords has greatly weakened. Liam reveals that in his current state, it is completely impossible for Arhan to fully digest the essence of his powerful sword. Arhan stands frozen, processing this major setback. Arhan takes a moment and calmly says he understands. Liam is surprised by the quiet response, asking if that is really all the reaction he has to such disappointing news. Arhan smiles warmly, explaining that he is simply grateful that another path remains. The ancestor is intrigued, repeating his words with a curious look. Arhan points out that if digestion is impossible in his current state, it means he can eventually digest it once he grows stronger. For now, he just needs to find swords that match his current capacity. Liam smiles, thoroughly impressed by his descendant's quick and analytical mind. He chuckles, telling Arhan that his perception is already at a swordmaster's level. He floats higher, advising that the more worn and used a weapon is, the better it will be for Arhan to digest. He tells Arhan to guide him to a place with many old, worn-out weapons. Liam offers to do the selection himself as they prepare to head out. Arhan leads him to a massive dark scrapyard filled with old metal and debris. Liam notes that the place is filled with an ominous aura that dark mages would love. He explains that everything old from the slums eventually gathers here, from worthless scrap metal to unusable weapons. Arhan smiles, stating there is no place more suitable than this to find the kind of swords his master described. Liam floats over the piles of garbage, reminiscing that he used to devour swords in bloody, war-torn places just like this. We see a flashback of a brutal battlefield littered with broken spears and swords gripped by dead soldiers. Arhan listens closely as his master explains how he ate with all his might again and again just to survive. Liam adds that he did everything he could to grow stronger and protect his people. He admits that this scrapyard reminds him of those endless clashes on the battlefields. Battlefields where some died today, endlessly clashing and breaking to protect the spark of life, and some managed to reach tomorrow. Suddenly, a single brilliant light flashes from beneath the piles of discarded weapons. Liam's eyes glow blue as he looks down, announcing that he has found it. He pats Arhan on the head, telling him that this will be his very first target. 1 month later, under a full moon, a group of armed thugs sneaks up to the caravan mansion, noting that nobody seems to be around. They step quietly into the dark mansion, whispering that it might have been used as a dark magic lab and then abandoned. Another thug scoffs, saying if that were true, they would already be dead. A third thug guesses it is probably where some disgraced fallen noble is hiding out. He sniffs the air, complaining about the high and mighty scent. They walk deeper into the luxurious hallway, looking around for valuable loot. The bald leader chuckles, bragging that their luck has finally turned, and this job is going to be incredibly easy since there is no caretaker. One of the thugs rummages through a chest, suddenly finding something interesting. He calls out to the boss, showing off a bunch of fine women's clothes that look fresh and valuable. The leader is shocked, asking if a noble lady actually lives here. The thug sniffs the silk, laughing creepily about how different the scent of noble skin is. The bald leader grins wickedly, touching the fabric with a perverted look. He licks his lips, muttering that if they play their cards right, they might get to have some other fun too. Suddenly, a cold voice from the dark commands them to stop right there. Arhan stands in the shadows, calmly stating that his mother liked things clean and hated messes. He steps forward into the moonlight, telling them to put down the clothes quietly so they can have a conversation. The thugs turn around, completely dumbfounded by the kid who just walked out. The leader sneers, asking if this brat is the master of the mansion's son or just some useless trash. Arhan ignores their insults, asking if they came looking for food or if they just need a place to stay. He adds with a cold glare that if that is the case, he is willing to accept them as neighbors. The bald leader is baffled, wondering if this kid has completely lost his mind. He mutters that noble bastards really have no fear. He steps forward with a heavy thud as his eyes fill with bloodlust. He asks Arhan why he did not just stay hidden quietly instead of crawling out to meet his death. Arhan stands calmly with his blue eyes showing zero fear as the giant thug approaches. He slightly tilts his head, completely unfazed by the threat. The leader loses his temper and lunges forward, swinging his heavy fist directly at Arhan's face. But in a split second, Arhan's eyes flash with a sharp, predatory glow. His eyes burn with intense orange light as he predicts the attack. With blinding speed, Arhan sidesteps and slashes right through the thug's arm. The leader screams in agony as blood sprays across the room. Arhan stands over him with his sword covered in fresh blood. He looks down coldly at the remaining thugs, declaring that they are not guests at all but merely targets. Back at the forge, the firewood crackles as Arhan heats the thin, needle-like sword they retrieved. The glowing, white-hot metal catches the light as Arhan prepares himself. He holds the glowing blade, asking his master if this really is the sword he must devour. Looking at the slender blade, he notes that it looks less like a sword and more like a needle. He asks his master if it would probably break helplessly if he tried to slash anything with it. His master, floating nearby, replies that his assumption is completely natural. It was not made to slash enemies or smash things in the first place. Liam explains that this weapon was made for one specific purpose. In a life-or-death duel, it was designed to pierce. It was built to slip between gaps and pierce the enemy's vital points to end their life. A dramatic memory illustrates a quick, deadly thrust right through an opponent. Arhan examines the needle-like sword, realizing it was made only for thrusting. He wonders if a sturdier, more familiar weapon would be better. Liam notes that his doubt is completely understandable. However, he adds that for Arhan's weak and frail body, nothing is more useful than the specific memories dwelling inside this sword. For reference, he explains that the previous owner of this blade was quite special. She was a female warrior who pierced the lives of over 200 enemies before dying alone. A quick silhouette shows her delicate back holding the needle sword. Liam commands him to show proper respect to the sword and devour it gratefully. Arhan takes a deep breath, knowing the weight of the steel may be light, but what dwells within is incredibly heavy. He bites down with the hot metal sizzling as the raw memories start flowing into his mind. He is told he will gain many things by inheriting this legacy. He collapses as the girl's memories begin flooding his consciousness. The girl's last memory was of a burning mansion swallowed by roaring flames. When the girl Melly, barely 10 years old, opened her eyes, everything in her life had changed. Her parents had been reduced to ash and the flames, unrecognizable even in form. She barely managed to save her own life, whispering in despair amidst the fire. We see her lying in a cold orphanage bed, wishing she had died with them. She lay in bed staring blankly as caretakers stood over her. After losing everything, she came to live in a rundown orphanage that worshipped the goddess of fire. She regarded fire as salvation, while dragged down to rock bottom once more. She who lost everything to fire was forced to live in a place that treated fire as a holy savior. The days that followed in that temple were completely horrific. The other children whispered behind her back, asking why half of her face looked like that. They gossiped, saying her scarred face was a curse from the goddess. She stood in the center, silently enduring the cruel, mocking whispers of the children. Every single day, she stared at her bandaged face in the mirror and prayed for death to come. She spent years praying in the dark, wishing for an end to her suffering. She tried to escape from the flames covering her face when she closed her eyes, and from the hatred surrounding her when she opened them. But her life changed forever when a certain day finally arrived. Under the moonlight, she watched an old man practicing his swordsmanship in the woods. His moves looked rough and crude, yet powerful. But it was beautiful enough to make her forget the hell she lived in. His name was Hegel, an old swordsman and former wandering knight who worked at the orphanage. Normally, she would not have dared to speak to the stern-looking old man, but she had reached her limit. She approached him in the clearing, asking how she could become like him. She stood before him, declaring that she wanted to learn his swordsmanship. She was taking her very first step toward actually living. Hegel stopped his training and stared at her in silence. He coldly replied that swordsmanship was not for a delicate girl like her. He warned her that a blade like this would only hurt her and told her to just go back inside. But she stood her ground, clutching her chest and begging him to teach her. She squeezed her clothes tightly with tears welling up under her bandages. She said that if she could just learn to fight, she would not have to be afraid of any fire in the world. Hegel stared at her, seeing her fierce determination under the moonlit sky. With a heavy thud, he slammed a barrel full of practice swords on the ground, telling her to pick anything. He told her that if she could swing it, he would teach her. She looked at the heavy swords in the barrel, asking if she really had to swing one of those. Hegel crossed his arms, asking what else she planned to do if not swing a sword. He watched as she slowly reached her hand out toward a specific weapon. She grabbed a thin, needle-like rapier, declaring that as long as she can stand and fight, she will do whatever it takes. She pulled the rapier out, pointing it directly ahead with perfect posture. Hegel looked at her stance, impressed by her choice. Melly smiled confidently, declaring that anything will do as long as she can pierce her enemies. Arhan's eyes snap open as the memory transfer completes. That was Meily's very first thrust. Back in the mansion hallway, Arhan unleashes that exact legendary thrust, piercing directly through the thug's throat in a flash of blood. The giant bulbed thug stumbles back, clutching his bleeding neck in complete shock. With a heavy crash, his lifeless body collapses onto the tiled floor. The other thugs stare in absolute horror at their fallen leader, completely unable to believe what just happened. They look at Arhan, trembling as they stammer in fear. One of them nervously asks if this is some kind of sick joke, with sweat dripping down his face. Arhan stands coldly, flicking the blood off his blade and stating that there is no need for any more conversation. Liam's spirit floats down behind Arhan, watching the battle unfold with a proud smile. The ancestor looks on, thoroughly impressed by how quickly Arhan digested the memory. Liam reveals that over the past month he did not teach Arhan any swordsmanship at all. Instead, he only put him through rigorous stamina training so his body would not tire. He kept a close eye on the boy, making sure his physical foundation was solid. He concludes that the fact Arhan can pull off a flawless thrust like that means his body is digesting the sword's power properly. He smiles, telling Arhan to show him his very first steps as a true caravan. Arhan stands tall, raising his needle-like sword in front of his face, with his eyes glowing with deadly intent as he prepares to finish the rest of the thugs. The spot where that uninvited guest was just pierced is deep and lethal. The dying thug groans, coughing up blood as he realizes a strike like this can only be achieved by digging precisely between the ribs. It struck his lung directly. There was no way a kid with zero skill or experience with swords could perform such a precise thrust. It is all thanks to the owner of the needle Arhan consumed a month ago. Meily's memories are fully integrated into his mind, guiding his every movement. He remembers her training with Hegel, learning how to stand properly and fight. She learned not just how to fight, but how to survive. Hegel's swordsmanship was not some systematically established academic theory, but rather a style ingrained from wandering as a free knight-errant. He was a grizzled old veteran who passed on his rough yet effective skills to her. His moves held a beautiful yet unspeakably lethal strength. She practiced tirelessly in the snow, mastering his techniques. Meili smiled brightly back then, truly loving the art of Hegel's sword. This sword is the physical manifestation of her love for her master's teachings. Several years later, Hegel lay sick in his bed, coughing weakly. He told Meili that someday she would eventually leave the orphanage. He held her hand tightly, asking her to go out into the wide world. With his final breath, he told her that this was his ultimate teaching to her. He looked at her warmly, whispering that he was glad she was the end of his long journey. He closed his eyes forever, calling out her name one last time. Mealy sat by his bedside, thanking him through her tears for absolutely everything. Following Hegel's final teaching, she left the orphanage and went out into the wide world with her needle-thin sword. Before long, she made a massive name for herself as a highly renowned and feared mercenary. People began whispering about her unusual needle-thin sword and her rare, deadly skill. Because she was a young woman with such unique lethality, they called her the Sewing Gypsy. Back in the present, Arhan feels Meili's presence guiding his blade. He clenches his fist, realizing that this must be the digestion his master spoke of as her memories flow directly into his mind. The remaining thugs stare at him in absolute terror, pleading for their lives. One of them begs him to please spare him, backing away in a panic. But Arhan steps forward, raising his sword without a shred of hesitation. He thrusts his sword forward, finishing off the begging thug decisively. He pulls his blade back as blood splatters across the floor. Arhan kneels down over the blood, calmly realizing that this is his very first kill. Surprisingly, he feels absolutely no emotion or guilt rising within him. He analyzes the situation, knowing that the first man underestimated him, which let him exploit a sudden opening. But now, being outnumbered, he cannot expect the same luck. He glares at the remaining two thugs, wondering why they are not attacking when they clearly have the numerical advantage. The two remaining thugs stand frozen, sweating and trembling in fear. From the shadows, Liam observes their hesitation, noting that it is no wonder they are terrified after seeing Arhan's movement. He explains that Arhan's posture and strike did not look like anything a beginner could pull off. He points out that while moderate fear aids survival, excessive fear completely clouds objectivity. This fear inflates the enemy before their eyes, making them mistake Arhan for a far mightier being. In their terrified minds, Arhan looks like a murderous fiend, skilled with the sword itself. Arhan takes a deep breath, with his mouth slightly smeared with blood as he prepares to exploit their panic. He decides to make his move, launching himself forward. He dashes across the hall, leaving a blue trail in his wake. The thug screams in terror, begging him not to come any closer. Another thug swings his heavy mace in a desperate attempt to defend himself. But Arhan easily ducks under the heavy swing, with his movements perfectly fluid and fast. He remembers Meili's wisdom. Since she was not born with immense strength or stamina, time would never be on her side in a fight. The thug screams in frustration as his attack completely misses. Arhan slips right past his guard, getting inside his range. He positions his blade ready to strike from a blind spot. With a swift motion, he slashes across the thug's torso, and blood sprays instantly. The thug gasps in pain, with his eyes wide as he clutches his chest. Arhan leaps up and delivers a final decisive strike, pinning his opponent down. Meili's core philosophy was simple: make what you have shine. A giant thug swings a heavy warhammer down, but she easily slips around it. Her strength lay in her natural flexibility and her dancer-like body. She could strike with deadly precision from any position and from any angle. She leaps high into the air, flipping gracefully over her opponent. She drives her needle-thin sword straight down through his head. The giant thug screams in agony as the sword pierces completely through. He collapses, groaning weakly as he takes his final breath. Meili stands over the fallen mercenary, pulling her blade out cleanly. Back in the present, Arhan stands over the defeated thugs with his face cold and calm. The final surviving thug drops his knife, with his hands shaking violently in pure terror. He looks at the bloodbath around him, stammering and asking what kind of monster he has just run into. Arhan glares at him with eyes glowing with a faint, vengeful red aura, asking what he means by hell. Back under the full moon, the rustling wind blows through the dense woods as Arhan faces the remaining thugs. He stands ready, with his heart pounding but his mind completely calm. With a series of fast and decisive thrusts, Arhan slashes and pierces his opponents before they can even react. He swiftly maneuvers through their chaotic attacks, dodging and countering with perfect accuracy. Liam looks down at him, asking if he can finally cast aside all his doubts now. He notes that if Arhan possesses the stamina to swing a sword all day without breaking his breath, then 4 untrained thugs are absolutely no match for him alone. The dying thug lies on the ground, staring up in absolute disbelief as his vision begins to fade. Liam explains that a true caravan grows even stronger in the very midst of life-threatening combat. Arhan looks down at his hands, realizing that everything his master said was the absolute truth. He thinks of Meili, the young woman who had to fight so hard against the world, and feels a deep sense of understanding. He closes his eyes, feeling the warmth of her memories settle deep within him. Liam notes that as he becomes stronger, he will understand his opponents better. This is the true power of digestion. Liam looks at his young descendant with a serious expression, stating that he never lies when it comes to the way of the sword. However, he can guarantee that his days ahead will be filled with agony and a succession of hardships so great that death might seem preferable. Arhan stands firmly under the moonlit sky, listening to his master's warning. He clenches his fist, thinking that if only he could put a blade to Carlos's throat, nothing else matters. He declares with absolute resolve that no matter what that path is, he will move forward. Suddenly, we cut to Arhan gasping for breath as he clings to a sheer, steep cliff, muttering his master's name. He is climbing a massive stone wall with his hands slipping as he pants in exhaustion. He looks up at his master, wondering if this brutal training is truly the right direction. In the sky, crows call out as they fly over the towering cliff. Arhan is shown climbing the dangerous rocky mountain as small stones fall all around him. He struggles to find a solid grip on the edge with the ground far below him. Liam looks down at him, asking where that fierce gaze from last night went and why his doubts have flared up again. He adds that this trait of overthinking has been a part of him since he was a child, though he supposes it is also one of his strengths. Arhan grumbles as he pulls himself up, saying he will need to address that habit at some point. He asks Liam to first satisfy his curiosity. He wants to know about the different realms reached by those who possess martial talent, starting with Swordwalker. We see a silhouette of warriors on the battlefield. Swordwalkers are those who establish themselves as the strong axes of a fight. Above them are sword experts, heroes who can single-handedly turn the tide of war and reign above all other swordsmen. And at the absolute peak stands the most legendary realm of all, the realm of the Heart Sword, also known as Swordmaster. Liam asks Arhan where he thinks he belongs among these legendary ranks right now. He smirks, suspecting Arhan wants to give a spirited answer, but Arhan knows his own level all too well. He explains that the reservoir required to handle mana is called a mana heart. Since he has not even formed a mana heart yet, he does not think he even qualifies as a beginner. Liam praises his excellent self-objectification. He tells Arhan that indeed he is still an amateur among amateurs who has not even entered the threshold of the sword. Arhan grips the stone wall tightly with his fingers trembling from the intense strain. Liam then drops a bombshell, telling him that their goal right now is to create a mana heart. Arhan's eyes go wide, asking in disbelief if his master is seriously suggesting they take such a massive risk to form a mana heart right now. He points out that doing it in a dangerous place like this could literally kill him if he makes one wrong move. He notes that nowadays, people usually create a mana heart by taking an alchemist's potion or having a high-class knight inject mana to open their senses. He explains that even wealthy nobles and knights can easily form one with those safe methods. He complains, asking why they have to choose such a difficult, risky method instead of taking the easy path. He grits his teeth with his face pressed against the cold stone, unable to understand his master's logic. Liam smiles, stating that while forming a mana heart is indeed not an easy task, there is no reason they should follow the common way. He looks Arhan in the eyes, declaring that the unique, unyielding power of firm steel dwells deep within their caravan blood. Continuing his training, Arhan is seen climbing the steep rocky mountain with the sunset painting the sky behind him. He remembers the days when he was completely exhausted from dealing with uninvited guests at the manor. He struggled through the terrible muscle pain from his physical training, making it a battle just to lift his arms. Yet he did not miss a single day of this hellish training. He grips the rocky edge with his worn, blood-stained fingers, pulling himself up step by step. If you were to ask him if he completed the mana heart through that ridiculous training, he has a simple answer. Unfortunately, he did not. He sits alone under the trees, catching his breath after another long day. He lets out a tired sigh, looking closely at his hand as a faint blue aura begins to wrap around his fingers. However, a very clear change is taking place. His eyes shine with a sharp, determined glow. This is the blackened Swordmaster. A heavy, swinging pendulum on a chain flashes in front of him. In his mind, he tracks the movement with perfect slow-motion clarity. He easily ducks and slips past the swinging iron weights. His senses have become incredibly sharp, allowing him to perceive the attacks before they even land. He envisions Meili's memory of fighting a heavy-handed mercenary covered in chains. He watches her slip through the mercenary's heavy swings with her focus entirely locked. She slides underneath his guard with perfect fluid movement. With a swift flick, she deflects his heavy chain, completely turning the tables. She moves like wind, holding the needle sword and preparing for a single precise thrust. The mercenary screams in frustration, trying to swing his heavy weapon again, but it is already too late. She slides right past him with her blade moving in a flash of light. In that fleeting moment, time itself seemed to stop for everyone else, except for Meili, who had already completed her strike. The mercenary stands completely frozen, with his eyes wide in utter disbelief as he realizes he has been bested. Her eyes glowed with complete confidence as she finished the battle. Her swift thrusts had found every single opening in his heavy armor. This is how Meili fought back then, utilizing her speed and precision. There is only one real reason for this massive, sudden change in Arhan's abilities. It is the undeniable fact that he has finally become able to feel and channel mana. A view of the quiet cemetery inside the woods where swords are planted as tombstones. He sits on the ground pointing out that even though he has not formed a mana heart yet, he has achieved incredible results. He admits that this is all thanks to the power of the needle-thin sword he consumed. He looks up at his floating master and asks what kind of power he will possess once he reaches the next stage. Liam looks down at him, chuckling and telling him that he still has a very long way to go before he can lose his greenhorn status. He smiles, deciding to satisfy his descendants' curiosity. He explains that once he takes the next step, he will reach a level equal to the owner of the needle. Through the path drawn from the mana heart, he will officially reach the realm of a superhuman. A mighty knight is shown standing on a field. The world calls this stage Swordwalker. He warns Arhan that he will truly realize how vast the difference between them is the moment they face each other. Arhan nods slowly, saying he understands, and asks if that answers his question. He looks at Liam with a sharp, serious expression, stating he wants to ask one more thing. He has a strong feeling that his intuition is correct about something. A powerful warrior stands under the moonlight, surrounded by swirling wind. He asks his master if the man who came to destroy their village was actually a swordwalker. Liam looks at him, seriously confirming that he is indeed an opponent on a completely different level from the trash he has dealt with so far. He asks what Arhan plans to do, since his current state will not last a single second against him. Arhan rests his hand on the floor, saying his only option is to watch the situation and prepare for any eventuality. Liam notes that it would also be a valid judgment to abandon this territory and avoid a fight they cannot win. Arhan looks down sadly, stating that running away is simply an option he cannot choose. Even though this land is desolate and unrecognizable now, it is still his home. It is the only place left where he can remember his memories with everyone he loved. Liam stands quietly in the background, listening to his descendants' heavy words. Liam looks at his back, telling him to become strong. In this brutal kingdom, power is the only real answer, and any natural wish without strength is nothing more than greed. Arhan clenches his fist tightly, ready to use his grief as fuel. He vows to grow so strong that no one will ever dare to mock his words or his family again. Suddenly, a bright blue blade slices through the darkness, cutting their conversation short. A mysterious man appears under the trees, holding a glowing sword and telling Arhan not to even think about running away. The man points his glowing blade directly at Arhan with his face cold and menacing. He steps forward with his blue aura burning as he commands Arhan to show his back. The intruder glares with sharp, icy eyes, ready to strike. He coldly warns that if Arhan tries to flee, he will cut him down instantly. It looks like an unexpected, life-threatening ordeal has arrived far too soon for our young master. We see rain pouring down over the abandoned caravan village, with the sky gray and dark. The traveling warrior stands in the rain, looking at the silent houses. Even though the village is abandoned, he treats them with utmost respect, as if they still had owners. He never lays a hand on so much as a piece of scrap metal, living a humble life with only the few belongings he brought with him. Aside from that, he spends every single evening lost in deep thought while watching the sunset or immersed in solemn prayer. Observing this traveler has become a regular fixture of Arhan's daily routine, and he is certain the man is a knight. Liam agrees, pointing out that the traveler is indeed a swordsman who has reached the level of a swordwalker. However, he is exceptionally disciplined and adheres strictly to etiquette even when no one is watching. He explains that such stubborn, formal individuals are rarely found outside the knighthood itself. Arhan thinks that if that is the case, then having him as a neighbor might not be a bad choice, since knights are dedicated to upholding honor and pursuing justice. But Liam scoffs, telling Arhan that while they pursue honor, calling them righteous would be a massive mistake. He looks at the boy, explaining that honor is entirely subjective. The honor they chase and adhere to will not necessarily be perceived as good or righteous by everyone. He notes that a knight's honor is defined solely by the one to whom they have sworn their loyalty, dictated entirely by the will of their employer. In other words, they are executioners who carry out efficient killings using techniques passed down for generations. They are deadly enemies who are difficult to kill simply because they are clad in expensive gear. He warns Arhan not to be led astray by the hollow resonance of the word knight, and to observe and judge the true essence of the subject itself. He advises him to maintain his suspicion, calling it the most precious talent Arhan possesses. Arhan is surprised, wondering how suspicion can possibly be a talent. Liam explains that he has been that way since he was a child, endlessly dissecting the truth behind every tale. While he appeared to be listening to the legend of the caravan told by his father, internally he was picking apart the lies. Even in moments where he could have been endangered by the intoxication of his own power, Arhan found the answer by eliminating variables through pathological sensitivity and observation. Suspicion is an attitude, the drive to reach the truth by utilizing every means without being swayed by mere appearances. Those who do not know suspicion can never truly overcome their own limits. Liam smiles, telling him that this unique focus is precisely where his talent for the sword lies. Arhan looks up, nodding as he processes his master's deep words. He whispers that he will keep that in mind as he watches the traveler from the bushes. Suddenly, the traveling knight stops and calls out to Arhan, stating that he is well aware Arhan has been watching him. He stands tall, warning Arhan not to even think about running away. He points his glowing mana-infused blade directly toward Arhan's hiding spot. He unleashes a massive wave of pressure, commanding Arhan to show himself. He glares coldly, threatening to cut Arhan down where he stands if he tries to flee. Arhan steps out of the shadows, sweating, as he realizes just how terrifying this pressure is. He tightly grips his sword, realizing things have ended up like this. He recalls Meili's memories of being a feared mercenary known as the Sewing Gypsy. Because of her fame, she frequently received recruitment offers from prestigious mercenary groups, but conversely, she was also constantly harassed. Thugs and rival swordsmen would seek her out after hearing the rumors, looking to make a name for themselves. But she slaughtered them all, truly believing she had moved beyond the rank of a female mercenary and become a master swordsman. She smiled, proudly confident in her unmatched speed and precision. She realized all too soon that such a thought was pure arrogance. A powerful armored knight stood before her on the battlefield. The knight laughed at her, mockingly repeating her nickname and calling it perfectly suited for such a feeble blade. He told her not to be mistaken, calling her nothing more than a trivial mercenary who was completely out of her depth. He grabbed her by her hair, slamming her down and making her gasp in pain. He whispered coldly that if she were not a woman, she would have died in an instant, telling her she was no different from an insect. He turned his back and walked away, declaring that the only reason she survived today was entirely due to the code of the Red Falcon Knights, who never take the lives of women or children. That day, Meili was left kneeling in the dirt, completely humiliated as she watched him leave. She trembled in absolute fury, with her hands shaking as she gripped her sword. That day, she learned of the existence of a vast, insurmountable wall known as a knight. She realized that the stage of a superhuman was Swordwalker. Back into present, Arhan gulps, realizing that the knight in Meili's memories is incomparably stronger than he is now. He watches the traveler step forward with the sheer pressure feeling infinitely more vivid than when he was hanging from the cliff. It is a feeling of an overwhelming, impending death. Arhan's heart beats wildly as his body reacts to the sheer danger, but his eyes dilate with extreme focus. Under this intense pressure, his senses open up and he can actually see the flow of mana. He observes the superhuman level of Swordwalker, where mana is projected outside the body like a network of veins. The traveler imbues both offense and defense with his sheer will, with the energy swirling around him. He stands completely focused, ready to face the powerful opponent. The traveler asks Arhan what the reason is for watching him. He states that, seeing as Arhan is likely the rumored entity who attacked the visitors here, he has no choice but to deem him an enemy unless he provides a valid reason. He glares coldly, commanding Arhan to answer him. Arhan raises his sword, explaining that his only intent was to determine whether the traveler was a guest or an uninvited intruder. He explains that a year ago, while he was away from the fief for a brief time, a black magician extended his reach, causing his neighbors to vanish and the village to fall into ruin. The traveler listens intently as Arhan explains the tragedy. Arhan adds that since then, barbarians and vagrants have frequently trespassed, threatening this village and his life, and he has dealt with them all by his own hand. He tells the traveler that, unlike those intruders, he seemed overwhelmingly powerful, to the point where he was certain he would perish if he approached recklessly. That is why he's been watching him, to judge whether he was an uninvited guest or a true guest. He states that if it were the latter, he had intended to ask him to be his neighbor, since this land holds a lifetime of his memories. He declares with absolute resolve that this place is far too precious to simply abandon and flee from. The traveler closes his eyes, processing Arhan's heartfelt explanation. He nods, admitting that Arhan has certainly endured a difficult ordeal, and says he is satisfied with that explanation. Now the traveler says it is his turn to state his position, suggesting they must understand each other's circumstances to become neighbors. He commands Arhan to cease his guard and lower his sword, promising that he too will sheath his blade and share his story. Arhan stands silently, with his silhouette cast against the light. Liam looks on with a sharp, suspicious glare, reminding Arhan of his core talent. Arhan looks the traveler in the eyes and firmly replies that he is sorry, but he cannot do that. He explains that he cannot fully place his trust in him yet, and at the very least, he needs this sword to protect himself. The traveler's expression goes cold. He tells Arhan that if he truly intended to harm him, a sword like that would be utterly meaningless. He points out that in a situation where both parties have drawn their weapons, to be the first to sheath one's blade is a violation of a knight's honor, and he must uphold his honor. Arhan stands his ground, declaring that he is aware of that, but he cannot back down either. He thinks of how he knelt in fear and surrendered before even attempting to fight the silver-haired killer. He glares with burning resolve, declaring that he swore he would never do such a thing again. The wind howls across the clearing as the traveling knight watches Arhan tightly gripping his thin sword. He looks closely at the boy, noting that his appearance is delicate enough that he could easily pass for a girl. Yet the traces of grueling, intense training are clearly visible all over his hands and body. He analyzes Arhan's posture, realizing that he uses an unorthodox style that pours absolutely all of his strength into the very first strike. By any generous estimation, he is still just a beginner who has not even broken the mold of a novice. In other words, he does not pose even a shred of a threat to a seasoned warrior like him. The traveler is certain that Arhan knows this fact himself, and yet, he is completely bewildered by the fierce, cold look in the boy's eyes. Arhan's blue eyes glow with a sharp, predatory focus, showing zero intention of backing down. Seeing that resolve, the knight realizes a half-hearted response will not suffice. He grips his own sword hilt. He slowly draws his blade, with the cold metal reflecting a brilliant mana-charged blue aura. He holds his sword forward, ready to meet Arhan's challenge head-on. The two stand opposite each other with a single, tense line of energy connecting them in the silent clearing. Arhan realizes he needs to strike first. He decides to target the knight's wrist to disarm him quickly and avoid any unnecessary injuries. He charges forward, aiming his needle-thin blade directly at the knight's hand. In his mind, he is completely focused on this single, precise strategy. With a loud clash, Arhan thrusts his sword, but the knight easily blocks the attack. Sparks fly as their blades collide. The knight looks at him with wide, shocked eyes, completely caught off guard by the sheer force of the kid's block. He cannot believe his own sword was actually deflected by a kid who has not even reached the level of a sword beginner yet. The force of the deflection vibrates right up his arm. But that is not all. Arhan immediately pivots, sliding his blade along the knight's sword. With a single sharp breath, Arhan unleashes a rapid succession of thrusts. The surrounding mana surges like a massive wave around them. Arhan's eyes flash with intense blue energy as his speed increases dramatically. The knight struggles to process this bizarre mana heart. He knows that even with that abnormal heart, it should be impossible for a mere beginner to parry his sword so easily. Ordinary mana hearts are meant to have soft, flexible properties. But Arhan's mana heart is remarkably firm and solid, taking the shape of a hardened crystal. It is as hard as pure steel, fueling his strikes with incredible physical impact. Although Arhan cannot be certain of anything, yet one thing is abundantly clear. A decisive, powerful strike is coming. He pours absolutely everything he has into this single ultimate thrust. He takes a deep breath with his mouth slightly open as he launches his body forward. He barely manages to block the knight's counterstrike, with his hand shaking violently from the impact. He realizes that blocking that attack just now was not due to his own skill. It was nothing more than a stroke of pure luck. To begin with, the knight had no intention of harming him, aiming only for Arhan's wrist with minimal power. Arhan knows that predicting the incoming trajectory and thrusting the tip of his needle into that small gap is his only hope. He leaps forward, aiming a lightning-fast thrust right through the knight's guard. But the counterforce of the collision sends an agonizing pain through Arhan's body, feeling as if every bone in his body is being shattered. He stares at the knight, realizing there is a truly desperate, insurmountable gap in their actual power. It feels like he is standing before a massive predatory beast. Yet this life-or-death struggle is exactly what he has longed for so much. Even though he is still only a beginner, and his thrust will not reach that man, he refuses to back down. He uses his unyielding resolve and his memories of Milei's struggles as a solid foothold. He remembers the day she collapsed before the overwhelming wall of a knight. Facing an insurmountable limit, head on her body trembled with fear. And in that moment of despair, the very first thing that came to her mind was the voice of her master Hegel. Hegel lay dying in his bed, weakly giving her his final words. He told her never to forget that when faced with a wall, most swordsmen consider it an insurmountable limit. But that is merely an excuse for those who choose complacency, because they lack the courage to confront it. He looked at her lovingly, reminding her that by nature walls exist to be overcome. He told her that the fear felt before a wall is the fate of all who hold a sword, and she must never look away. Instead, she must stand tall and face it head-on. Milei stood tall before the armored falcon knight, with her body engulfed in a crimson, determined aura. She gripped her sword hilt tightly, ready to face her fear. She dashed forward with her boots kicking up dust as she charged. She unleashed a barrage of rapid thrusts, refusing to let her fear paralyze her. She knew that falling to her knees in helplessness meant she would surely be cut and torn apart miserably time and time again. She bared her teeth, determined to break through her limits. She smiled, fiercely determined to stand beyond that wall and survive. In the present, Arhan's heart beats wildly, echoing that same legendary resolve. He channels the full power of his mana, determined to believe in himself and overcome this impossible opponent. The traveling knight looks at Arhan, noting that if one has lived a fierce life wielding a sword, they will inevitably encounter it. He grips his sword hilt, preparing for Arhan's challenge. He points out the massive wall that blocks a beginner's path. He unleashes his massive, dense aura, stating that the intimidation seeping deep beneath the skin, along with the hopelessness that feels like it will crush you, will make taking even a single step feel incredibly burdensome. It is a natural instinct to want to turn your back and run away. Even so, Arhan stands firm. The knight looks at the boy, realizing that instead of fleeing, he is trying to crash directly against that wall. He scoffs internally, calling this resistance nothing more than youthful, foolish bravado. But Arhan knows that this trial is exactly what is necessary for him to grow. He realizes his path does not have to be perfect. He steps forward, firmly ready to strike. If there is even a tiny possibility of reaching that wall, that alone is enough. He must cast aside all doubts. He must analyze which muscles the knight is putting strength into, how he catches his breath, and what kind of trajectory he intends to draw. He must gather every single clue and exclude all the unnecessary details, and create a perfect path to strike. His mind fully visualizes the trajectory of his needle sword. He funnels his mana directly into the tip of his blade, creating a path that can reach the target. The blue mana lines swirl around him, locking on to the knight. Liam looks down with a proud smile, encouraging his descendant. He tells him to move forward without yielding to any adversity. He declares that this unyielding spirit is precisely what a caravan is. The mana swarms around Arhan, forming a beautiful, intricate pattern. Liam tells him never to fear colliding and shattering. He commands him to willingly throw his entire body before the trial and forge himself. Only then can he unfold the true will of the caravans before the world. Arhan unleashes a massive, blinding column of blue mana. The sheer force of his energy creates a massive shockwave, shattering the ground beneath him. He charges forward with absolute speed, completely leaving his fear behind. He remembers the tragedy that took everything from him, standing alone amidst the blazing flames. He remembers the days when even breathing was an unbearable burden. That is how he knew that his own weakness was the only thing that would run away. Therefore, he will pierce through this wall no matter the cost. He remembers Meili's tragic memories of the fire that destroyed her family and her daily life. He sees her standing before a world full of fire, a fire that completely took away her future. If someone were to ask her if she reached enlightenment, her answer would be simple. She was no longer afraid of the fire nor the world. Even if she crumbled, she would face it head-on. She lunged forward with a wild, flaming strike, cutting down her opponent. Arhan mirrors her moves, charging straight toward the knight with incredible momentum. He screams in fury, pouring all of his mana into this single, ultimate thrust. The knight grits his teeth, matching Arhan's sheer force. Their blades collide in a massive explosion of mana and light. Arhan's sword is deflected, spinning high into the air. He looks up at his lost weapon, thinking of Meili's master Hegel, and asking if he is finally at peace. Meili had left the orphanage and come out into the wide world carrying Hegel's teachings. She harbored the single needle he had placed in her hand, ready to survive. She yearned for a free, wandering life, just like Hegel's. But she was not sure if she can say she really lived that kind of life. The world was teeming with monsters of power far greater than her, and there were many she could never hope to defeat. Still, she could say at least this much about Hegel. Until the very last moment of her life, whatever wall stood on her path, she never backed down. She never turned away from it, standing firm against the flames. She hoped that if the doctrine was true, they would meet again in the embrace of the flames, and she would tell him her story. We see a flashback of Meili crying as Hegel teaches her under the sun. She ran happily toward him in the woods. She was no longer afraid of the fire. She smiled warmly, with her tears of grief finally turning into tears of peace. The campfire crackles softly under the starry night sky as embers fly upwards. Arhan slowly opens his eyes, with his vision slightly blurry. He groans, looking down as he realizes he is lying on the ground near the warm fire. He slowly sits up, clutching his head and wondering if he lost consciousness after that intense clash. He pulls the cloak tighter, realizing what this means. He looks down at his broken needle sword lying in the dirt. Even though he gave it everything, he failed to break through that wall. He picks up the hilt of his broken sword, staring at it in silent defeat. Liam's spirit floats down, gently telling him not to be disheartened. He declares that his clash was a struggle entirely worthy of the caravan name. He smiles proudly, asking Arhan if he has not noticed the massive change himself yet. Arhan looks up as a surge of energy washes over his body. He clenches his fist, realizing he can feel his muscles have become incomparably more flexible than before. In the quiet night, he can hear even the tiny rustle of a mouse in the grass. His senses have sharpened to the level of a wild beast. He feels as if he has truly inherited the legacy of Meili, a veteran mercenary who spent her entire life on the battlefield. That unyielding spirit that never gives up even in the face of immense trials has been fully integrated into his soul. He smiles weakly, muttering if his master could not have just told him things like this from the very start. Liam chuckles softly, enjoying his descendant's light-hearted grumbling. Suddenly, heavy footsteps approach their camp from the dark woods. The traveling knight steps into the firelight, noting that it seems Arhan has finally regained consciousness. Arhan immediately flinches, grabbing his broken blade and taking a defensive stance. The knight raises his hands in a friendly gesture, smiling warmly and saying he only went to fetch some drinking water. He sighs, realizing there are still some major misunderstandings between them. Arhan keeps his guard up, glaring at him warily. Liam speaks to Arhan, advising him that there is no need to be so wary, since that man is not the kind to cause him harm. He looks at the knight, noting that his aura is entirely peaceful now. Arhan slowly lowers his sword slightly, but his eyes remain sharp with suspicion. The knight nods, saying he understands Arhan's caution, given what he has been through. He reaches for the bag on his belt, offering to tell his story first, to help Arhan lower his guard. He unties the bag, preparing to explain why he came all the way to this abandoned village. He wants to prove why he cannot be a threat to Arhan, asking him to listen to his story for a moment. Arhan watches him closely, with his posture slightly relaxing. The knight reveals that he is Sir Patel, a retired knight with nowhere to go. He unbuttons his shirt, revealing a shocking, glowing purple scar spreading across his chest. He explains that he is a terminally ill patient on the verge of death. Even high priests who studied medicine all their lives have affirmed that he has a month left at most. Arhan is stunned, staring at the magical corruption burning on the knight's chest. Sir Petal asks Arhan if he would please listen to his story for just a moment. Hearing an old warrior talk about his final days hits different. Arhan is realizing this man is not an enemy at all. They sit together by the warm fire, with Patel pouring his heart out. Regrettably, unlike his magnificent swordsmanship, he was not very eloquent. He often repeated himself and poured out his story and emotions incoherently. It certainly was not smooth communication, but to Arhan, that clumsiness felt like unadorned, genuine sincerity. He stared into the crackling fire, explaining that the reason he left his knightly order is nothing grand. He simply did not want to be a burden to his comrades while ending his final breathless days. For his final moments, he simply wished to quietly spend his time on his own terms. Arhan looks down, silently processing the old knight's tragic destiny. Liam looks at Sir Petal, muttering that there seems to be no falsehood in his words, and he does not seem to be lying. He points out that even at this very moment, Petal's mana heart is actively being devoured by the purple illness. Once that magical corruption completely encroaches upon his mana heart, his life will end. He asks Arhan what they should do now. Arhan stands up, looking at the retired knight with a gentle expression. He reaches out his hand, asking if this is enough to qualify Sir Petal as his new neighbor. He knows it must not have been easy for a proud knight to share such a vulnerable story. He introduces himself, shaking Petal's hand and declaring that his name is Arhan. He smiles warmly, welcoming Sir Petal to the neighborhood. Liam watches them with a pleased smile, happy to see Arhan making a powerful ally. Arhan stands in the courtyard, looking up at the sky. His newly developed mana core hums with power as a bright blue light shines on his chest. Liam smiles, muttering that the time has finally come for them to take the next step. He points out that there is no other place better than that for Arhan's training. A few days later, they travel down a beautiful, winding dirt road through the green hills. Arhan looks around, admitting that, honestly, it is a bit hard to understand why they had to travel so far. Arhan is riding in a horse-drawn carriage, with the wheels clattering against the dirt road. He sits on the bench, pointing out that now that he has ascended to a sword beginner, he thought his master might instruct him in swordsmanship directly. Liam floats cross-legged next to him, explaining that thanks to Sir Petal, they do not have to worry about intruders disturbing the mansion for a while. Sir Petal is shown guarding the caravan mansion, looking out over the territory. Arhan asks why they need to travel so incredibly far just to train. Liam sighs, telling him that he still has not escaped the mindset of an ordinary person. He rants about how many times he must explain that they caravans are different from anyone else in the world. He reminds him that as long as the blood of steel flows in his body rather than conventional training, he must put his body through an endless struggle that beats it to its limits. He explains that the digestion of new powerful swords is the absolute highest priority for his growth right now. He grins, declaring that their current destination is the perfect place to look for such rapid growth. He explains that it is a place where, regardless of status or origin, only those who covet flesh, splattering strife gather. He reveals that in his era, that place was given a legendary name. The carriage approaches a massive stone coliseum under the bright sun. Inside, the crowd is cheering wildly, screaming and chanting in absolute excitement. We see the massive coliseum from above, with gladiators clashing in the center of the ring. They have finally arrived at the arena. Let us see what kind of swords Arhan is going to devour here. We see the bustling iron city Firma, with its tightly packed roof stretching across the valley under a bright blue sky. As one of the major cities symbolizing the Iron Kingdom, metallurgy has developed so extensively here that the sound of hammering metal echoes from every corner. It is no exaggeration to say that almost every armament used in the entire kingdom is crafted right here, earning it the title of the Holy Land of Swords. However, the true driving force that revived and popularized Ferma lay somewhere else entirely. And that key driving force is right here at the arena. Liam floats beside Arhan, looking at the massive Colosseum and noting that the ring itself is not too bad. He smiles, feeling the immense heat and battle spirit radiating even outside the stadium. He mutters that the place has not changed a single bit. He recalls how truly diverse life or death struggles were fought here in his own past. This was the place of the brutal death match. Gladiators equipped with unique traits and lethal techniques would roll on the dirt fighting like wild beasts. The spectators, drunk on the scent of blood and violence, would willingly throw their gold coins betting and shouting with feverish passion. Arhan listens with a smirk, saying that if it is really as his master says, then there is indeed no better place for him to grow his strength. He thinks that not only will he gain invaluable practical experience, but if he can devour the weapons taken from fallen gladiators, he could become stronger at an incredible pace. But Liam immediately cuts him off, calling him a truly simple-minded descendant. He scoffs, pointing out that if it were really that simple, he would have already made Arhan devour all the weapons scattered in the junkyard, or even the keepsakes left behind by those uninvited guests they defeated. Liam turns to him with a sharp, serious glare, explaining that the digestion process does not work by simply eating weapons recklessly. He warns that if he eats too many random swords, he will be completely overwhelmed by the chaotic memories of the blades and completely lose his own sanity. He sternly tells Arhan that he must be the one to control the sword, not let the sword control him. Therefore, until he opens his eye of selection, he must only consume the swords Liam personally selects. Arhan nods in agreement, saying he understands, and they make their way inside the Colosseum. 3 hours later, they find themselves in the crowded player registration hall of the arena. A massive gladiator with a heavy iron helmet laughs, asking Arhan if this is really his very first time participating in the arena. The receptionist behind the desk smiles, telling Arhan to please head to the player registration desk and get his medal issued first. Arhan stands amidst the towering muscular warriors, looking a bit confused. He looks at the receptionist, asking what exactly a medal is. Behind Arhan, Liam looks equally shocked and completely dumbfounded. His jaw drops as he stares blankly, realizing he has absolutely no idea what they are talking about. He sweats, muttering in panic that there was absolutely no such thing as a medal during his time. Arhan looks at him in complete disbelief. The receptionist cheerfully tells the young man to please get his medal and get back in line. A chart on the wall shows the different weight classes and medals ranging from black, white, platinum, gold, and silver. Arhan looks at the heavy bronze medal placed in his hand, realizing he has been placed in the lowest tier. He looks at the medal with a wry smile, muttering that it seems quite a lot has changed since his ancestors' era. He glances back at Liam, who is sweat-dropping and grumbling, trying to explain that the Colosseum was originally a place where even a bookworm who had never held a sword would be thrown in with northern barbarians. Back in his day, it was a brutal bloodbath where gladiators fought until only one was left standing. Arhan notes that they must have introduced weight classes to keep the spectacles entertaining and organized. After all, if life-risking bloodbaths occurred for hundreds of years, not only would there be no gladiators left, but the spectators betting their money would find matches with obvious outcomes incredibly boring. A notice on the wall states that experts should fight experts, and novices should fight novices for matches to remain entertaining. Liam grumbles that times have indeed changed. They walk through the busy streets of Ferma, where the arena has officially become a symbolic landmark that tourists visit from afar. The city has flourished into a massive, highly successful metropolis, surrounded by tourists and soldiers. Arhan notes that they rarely take the loser's life anymore, which is an implicit rule among the modern gladiators. Liam laughs heartily, finding it absurd that the Colosseum has turned into some cheap tavern play. Arhan sighs, muttering that the more he hears, the more dumbfounded he becomes, but it might actually be fortunate for them. Liam agrees, pointing out that fighting against an equal enemy provides a different kind of teaching anyway. He suggests they use their free time to look around the local smithies, since the quality of weapons here will be distinctly better than those near the village. He points out that Arhan's sword is particularly prone to breaking, so acquiring a few spare blades is a smart move. Suddenly, Liam stops mid-sentence with his face going completely blank. He stares ahead in complete shock. Arhan looks at him, asking what is wrong. Arhan turns around with his eyes widening as he sees what has caught his master's attention. He gasps, completely speechless by the sight. They find themselves standing before a massive grand hallway lined with display cases. Arhan mutters in disbelief, asking why there are legendary weapons just sitting in the middle of the street like this. He walks along the corridor, looking at the glowing, magnificent swords. Liam floats next to him with his eyes completely glued to the legendary blades. A gentle older voice speaks up from behind them, chuckling warmly. A friendly caretaker with a mustache welcomes them, noting that it seems to be the first time the young master has seen the Hall of Fame. He introduces himself as Tom, the proud caretaker of this grand hall. He politely offers to give them a brief explanation of the legendary weapons displayed here. Liam looks at the old caretaker with his interest thoroughly piqued. Arhan politely introduces himself, saying he would be grateful to listen. Tom explains that the armaments displayed here belonged to legendary gladiators who achieved outstanding historical feats in the arena in the past. We see a flashback of a grand tournament under the bright sky with warriors clashing in front of roaring crowds. Tom explains that the weapons are exhibited here to honor their indomitable fighting spirit. Arhan looks at the magnificent blades, completely fascinated by their history. Tom proudly gestures toward the cases, explaining that taking care of this place is his lifetime purpose. Suddenly, Liam floats closer with a wild, wide grin on his face. He commands Arhan to ask the caretaker one specific question. He tells Arhan to ask him if there is any way to legally possess the swords displayed here. Arhan is completely taken aback, sweat dropping as he realizes what his master has in mind. He stares at the magnificent, glowing rapier displayed behind the glass. Swirling purple mana gathers around the legendary blade. This is officially the next sword Arhan must devour. Arhan stands before the massive coliseum, ready to take his first steps inside. He enters through the stone hallway labeled Entrance for Arena Competitors, with his footsteps echoing in the dark corridor. He walks calmly with his face showing a serious expression. He is entirely focused on his mission to find and digest new swords. Back at the Hall of Fame, the caretaker Tom explains that they indeed grant special privileges. For those who have proven themselves as gladiators, they are granted the right to possess one piece of weaponry matching the color of their medal. In other words, every time the rank of your medal rises by one stage, you will be able to obtain one weapon from the hall. For reference, the thin rapier Arhan just had his eyes on can be obtained once he gets promoted to silver rank. Arhan looks determined, realizing he has a clear path to claim that legendary blade. He walks away thinking that to others these may just be old useless weapons, but to him they are swords with value like pure gold. Liam grins, noting that he now has even more reasons to come to the arena. He tells Arhan that they must secure usable swords through promotion. He chuckles, whispering that if it were up to him, he would commit robbery and steal them all. But that caretaker is definitely not an ordinary old man. Arhan is surprised, pointing out that Tom just seemed like a kind, harmless old gentleman. Liam looks at him seriously, explaining that although the manager's power is only half complete, he is still incredibly dangerous. He reveals that Tom can use mana as armor for absolute defense, confirming that he is actually a sword expert. Arhan gasps in disbelief, realizing Tom is at the legendary stage right before Swordmaster. He watches his floating master, asking why such a powerful superhuman existence is working as a simple manager. Liam explains that usually those who reach that high realm are complete eccentrics. He concludes that robbing the hall will definitely have to wait for later, and Arhan agrees, sweat dropping. He notes that anyway, even if much of the arena has changed since his ancestors' era, some things remain exactly the same. If he only has to face his opponents as a gladiator in a controlled match, he thinks it is not a bad setup. He walks down the corridor ready to meet his very first challenger. A hooded announcer approaches him, asking what alias he intends to use in the arena. He explains that no one who sets foot in the arena ever uses their real name. He commands Arhan to utter the name he will be most proud of that will accompany his life as a gladiator. Arhan looks back on his memories of his father proudly showing him the family portrait. He remembers his father talking about their legendary ancestors. He recalls his father telling him to always live with the proud blood of the caravans flowing through his veins. He remembers standing before that massive portrait of the legendary founder Liam Caravan. He steps out onto the bright sands of the Colosseum. An old gatekeeper smiles as Arhan decides on his alias. The gatekeeper steps aside, wishing him victory on his first steps. Arhan walks onto the massive sands, choosing his grandfather's legendary name, Liam. He wears a simple steel mask, adjusting his grip on his sword. He looks out over the massive circular stadium, completely focused on the fight ahead. The announcer yells that bronze is the lowest rank in the arena, and matches in this rank do not even get a shred of expectation except from petty gamblers. He explains that these low-tier matches are nothing more than a way to pass the time and soothe boredom between the major events. Therefore, what fills the stadium at this time is not enthusiastic cheers or applause, but terrible mocking boos and harsh criticism from the impatient crowd. Gamblers scream from the stands, demanding that they hurry up and get this boring match over with. They yell insults, calling them weak, and telling them to just die already if they are going to waste time. Arhan stands in the center of the ring, looking up at the hostile crowd with complete indifference. Liam floats next to him, asking if he is getting intimidated by the boos, but Arhan replies that he is not. Liam smiles, praising his good mindset. He reminds Arhan that he has staked the legendary name on this battlefield. He tells him to keep in mind that he is shouldering the history and honor of Caravan. Arhan grins under his mask, replying with complete confidence. He declares, that is precisely why he will definitely win. The host raises his arms announcing the third match of today's bracket. He introduces the rookie gladiators, shouting that they will show the crowd the charm of a raw, unpolished fight. He screams out Arhan's alias, presenting the greenhorn rookie gladiator Liam. He then introduces his opponent, who has brutally taken the lives of every gladiator since his debut. A massive, heavily armored gladiator steps onto the sand, carrying a giant two-handed sword. The announcer screams out his name as the giant gladiator Temur. Temur grins wickedly, raising his massive sword as the crowd cheers for him. He looks down at Arhan, laughing at his alias and calling it some stupid name he came up with. Bro is really out here trying to bully a literal teenager. Temur is about to find out exactly why Arhan is the main character. He leans closer, proposing a mockingly generous offer. He laughs, telling Arhan to take off his ridiculous sword and mask and dance to the beat of his clapping hands. He whispers that out of special generosity, he will preserve that slender neck of his. He scoffs, asking Arhan if there was a reason he crawled out here, or if he actually believed the unspoken rules of this place. Temur throws back his head, letting out a booming, arrogant laugh. He yells that in his homeland, men who lose are always slaughtered. He boasts that he brutally killed all 3 of his previous opponents. He smirks, bragging that he snapped their necks with his very own hands. A dark silhouette shows Temur lifting an opponent off the ground by his neck and strangling him. He laughs insanely, saying that the winner deserves the absolute privilege of being the best entertainer. He commands Arhan to do his best and shake that girl-like body of his so the fight will not be completely dull. Arhan stands in silence with his eyes cold and calm under his mask. He listens to the giant's arrogant boasting, entirely unfazed. The announcer looks on with a smile, noting that the war of nerves is already fierce even before the match starts. He yells for both gladiators to take their positions, raising his hand. He announces that they will start the match immediately. Arhan slightly tilts his head, calmly stating that he also has a proposal. Temur rests his massive sword on his shoulder, mockingly waiting for the kid to speak. Temur grins, but then a look of complete disbelief washes over his face. He lets out a sudden snort of laughter. He bursts into roaring laughter, mockingly shouting that he is so incredibly scared of the kid's threat. The spectators laugh along, calling Arhan's words pure rookie bravado and asking if he got his ideas from some cheap night novel. They jeer, asking who the hell Liam is anyway, and mocking if it is the name of his dead father. The stadium is filled with loud, mocking laughter, completely heating up the atmosphere. Temur wipes a tear of laughter from his eye, telling Arhan that if he listens obediently, he will let him live. But Arhan does not waste another second. He dashes forward with blinding speed, with his blade flashing in the sun. He stands behind the giant as a spray of blood erupts from Temur's throat, while he commands him to apologize for insulting his name. Temur stands completely frozen, with his eyes wide in utter terror. Arhan coldly warns him that if he wants to die comfortably, he must apologize. Temur stands completely frozen as a cold droplet of sweat rolls down his cheek, while Arhan's blade rests gently on his neck. Arhan glares at him with complete confidence, telling him to apologize for insulting his name. Temur's veins bulge as he grinds his teeth in sheer embarrassment and rage. He lets out a wild roar, swinging his massive sword backward to push Arhan away. He slams his giant sword down, creating a massive explosion of sand and dust. But Arhan easily slides back, completely unfazed by the sudden retaliatory strike. Temur pants heavily, with his face pale as he realizes just how close that was. He touches his bleeding neck, seeing the fresh blood on his fingers. He lets out a primal, echoing scream of pure fury. In the stands, the gamblers look on with wide, shocked eyes, completely stunned by the rookie's unbelievable agility. One of the spectators smiles wickedly, thoroughly enjoying the sudden, unexpected shift in the fight. The entire Coliseum erupts in loud, hyped cheers, with the crowd going absolutely wild. Temur pants heavily, with his mind racing as he tries to understand what the hell just happened. Just a moment ago, the kid was trembling in fear, looking completely clumsy. How could a mere greenhorn rookie pull off such a precise, terrifying counterthrust? His eyes go wide with a sudden dawning realization. He looks at Arhan's silhouette, realizing the boy has a calm, powerful aura swirling around him. He wonders if the kid was actually pretending to be weak on purpose to make him let his guard down and create an opening. Temur sneers, muttering that, like he said, this is definitely not a game for kids. He grinds his teeth, calling Arhan a sneaky, underhanded bastard. He grips his giant sword hilt with both hands, with his knuckles turning white. With a furious roar, he charges forward, swinging his massive blade in a desperate attempt to shred Arhan to pieces. He unleashes a barrage of heavy, wild slashes, with the metal cutting through the air. He curses loudly, with his frustration boiling over as he tries to hit his agile target. But Arhan simply floats like a ghost, dodging every single attack with complete ease. Temur's eyes dilate with absolute shock as Arhan evades by a paper-thin margin every single time. His evasion is so fluid and effortless, it looks like a beautiful coordinated dance. Temur gasps completely out of breath, wondering who the hell this kid actually is. In his terrified mind, Arhan looks like a colossal glowing snake waiting to strike. With a swift motion, Arhan steps inside his range and slashes with his blade, leaving a clean streak. He delivers a rapid flurry of strikes with his needle sword flashing in the sun. He thrusts his blade forward with perfect precision. The sharp needle pierces directly through Temur's heavy shoulder armor. Temur groans in intense pain with his weapon slipping from his grasp. He is sent flying backward, crashing heavily onto the hard sand. Arhan stands calmly in the middle of the ring with his blade pointed down. He looks down at the defeated giant with a cold, piercing glare. Temur pants heavily, struggling to even lift his head from the sand. He coughs up blood, completely defeated and out of options. He groans in agony as Arhan steps closer. His massive sword lies abandoned next to him on the blood-stained ground. He trembles in absolute fear, realizing his life is completely in the kid's hands. Arhan walks slowly toward him with his footsteps heavy and deliberate. He stands over the fallen gladiator, offering him the same proposal. He tells him to take off his ridiculous helmet and dance to the beat of his clapping hands. And only then will he at least spare his useless head. Talk about a poetic reversal. Liam looks down with a smug smile, thoroughly enjoying the spectacle. In the stands, the announcer is completely speechless, with his eyes wide in utter disbelief. Temur pants with his head pressed against the dirt as he trembles in humiliation. He weakly stammers, agreeing to accept the humiliating offer. He begs for just a moment to catch his breath with blood dripping onto the sand. He looks up warily, trying to hide his absolute terror. He slowly reaches his hand out toward his fallen sword on the floor. But before he can even touch the hilt, Arhan's blade drives straight down, pinning his hand directly to the ground. Temur screams in absolute agony as the sword pierces completely through his palm. He shrieks with his eyes bulging in pure terror. Arhan coldly tells him he should have decided his next move far more carefully, because there will not be any more offers. Temur completely breaks down, weeping and begging on his knees. He sobs out an apology, begging Arhan to spare his life. In the stands, the spectators watch the sudden, brutal conclusion in complete silence. They stare with wide eyes, completely speechless by the rookie's sheer ruthlessness. Then the entire stadium erupts in a massive, roaring cheer, shouting his alias Liam over and over. The gamblers laugh hysterically, celebrating that they bet against the odds and are now filthy rich. They shout that this rookie is the best bronze gladiator they have seen in a very long time. The crowd is completely hyped, chanting the name of the little gladiator Liam. Arhan walks back through the dark corridor with the chanting crowd still echoing in the background. Back in the stands, Tom watches him leave, guessing that he has formed a connection with a very interesting gladiator. He is impressed that Arhan managed to receive such enthusiastic cheers from his very first match, but his expression goes serious, muttering that, on the other hand, he is slightly concerned. He looks out at the arena, knowing that in this coliseum, excessive interest from the crowd is often highly dangerous. It acts like a deadly poison, drawing unwanted attention from powerful and greedy forces. A few days later, under a clear blue sky, the massive stone coliseum stands tall and proud. Arhan stands at the reception desk, looking completely bewildered. He blinks, asking the receptionist if he heard her correctly. She smiles brightly, confirming that the arena has evaluated his performance very positively. She explains that they would like to offer him an unprecedented immediate challenge, the silver promotion match. A mysterious warrior with burning red eyes watches the arena. It seems a massive, dangerous challenger is waiting for Arhan on his next step. Arhan lets out a long sigh, looking down in deep thought. He reflects on how it has only been 2 days since his debut match against Temur, and in the 3 matches held since then, he has won them all with complete ease. He dispatched his opponents in a thoroughly rational and efficient manner, leaving the crowd completely amazed. He is shown standing victorious in the ring, holding his sword. The receptionist smiles brightly, asking him what he thinks of their sudden proposal. Arhan looks suspicious, noting that to see it as a normal offer, something feels terribly off. Liam watches her closely, with his eyes narrowing as he processes the situation. She explains that the condition for promotion is incredibly simple. He just has to duel against a contestant of their choosing. She leans in, telling him that the important thing is that he does not even need to fight hard. She raises her fingers, smiling, and saying that if he can just endure for 3 minutes after the match starts, his victory will be declared. She winks, telling him that this is a really rare, beneficial opportunity that he should not pass up. She adds that once he becomes silver, not only can he fight opponents who are incomparably stronger, but he will also receive special rewards. She smiles slyly, asking if he realizes what a tremendous opportunity this is, but Liam scoffs, calling it a blatant rookie stomping. He explains that it is an old tradition dating back from when this place was just a fighting pit. He looks serious, stating that it is a special event of the arena for the entertainment of the insidious audience. By luring a rookie with the promise of promotion and pitting them against a strong opponent they cannot handle, it is merely an exhibition of them being miserably toyed with. In reality, it is nothing less than a brutal public execution for the crowd's amusement. Liam advises Arhan that if he does not wish to be humiliated, it would be right to refuse this offer, as a proper opportunity for promotion will be given soon enough. He asks Arhan what he will do, noting that the choice is his. Arhan looks up with a sharp glare, saying that the answer is already completely obvious. He looks the receptionist in the eyes, declaring that he shall gladly go against whoever the opponent is. This is where our story continues. 2 days later, the arena notifies Arhan of his designated match opponent through a formal sealed letter. His challenger is a graduate of a prestigious academy, undefeated in silver rank, and a powerhouse swordwalker. The academy is the premier educational institution for those with natural talent for the sword, or just having the diploma allows one to obtain the rank of knight. In other words, this opponent is overwhelming in every single aspect compared to Arhan. Walking through the streets with Sir Petal, Arhan is told that the opponent known as the Black Bride is pretty notorious. Petal warns him that not only does she show overwhelming skill in every match, but it is said that every single opponent she faces has been rendered completely unable to recover. Liam grumbles that those arena bastards have really made up their minds. He notes that if they prepared to that extent, even enduring 3 minutes will not be easy. He scratches his head, trying to remember what they call this kind of situation. He laughs heartily, saying they would call Arhan completely screwed. Arhan just sweat drops in response. Arhan walks calmly, pointing out that the Black Bride likely is not stronger than Sir Petal. Petal looks at him, confirming that even if he was frail due to his illness, he was still a powerhouse who reached the pinnacle among swordwalkers. Sir Petal's skill was indeed on a completely different level. However, the difference between Arhan's training with Petal and his upcoming fight is clear. Petal used swordsmanship specifically tailored to Arhan's level for the sake of his honor. He held back his true power to help Arhan learn without getting crushed. But he cannot expect such tolerance from the ruthless Black Bride, who will strike to kill from the very first second. Liam ruffles Arhan's hair, praising him for understanding the terrible reality approaching him and saying he is truly grateful. Arhan stands firmly, knowing his master never lies when it comes to swords. But he also has his steel mana heart and the valuable variable known as Mealy's memories. If it is just enduring for 3 minutes, he is confident he has more than enough strength to survive. Suddenly, a mysterious cloaked figure stands on the roof nearby, watching Arhan from above. The figure lowers her hood, calling out his name as the little gladiator, Liam. It is a young woman with a sharp, scar-lined face, staring down with intense dark eyes. Arhan looks up in shock, completely caught off guard by her sudden appearance. He realizes he could not feel her presence at all before she spoke with her stealth completely flawless. He looks at her long, pitch-black hair and her dark, menacing armor. He notices the unique shape of the sword she carries, which is a curved blade favored by warriors of the East. It is the Black Bride herself, standing on the edge of the building under the sunset. Arhan sweat drops, trying to play dumb and asking who the little gladiator is. He smiles nervously, saying he thinks she's gotten the wrong person. The woman simply glares at him, completely silent and unimpressed by his act. She jumps down from the roof with her heavy boots landing softly on the cobblestones. She warns him that he is only making things troublesome. In a split second, she draws her blade with blinding speed. She thrusts her sword directly toward his face. Arhan instinctively blocks the sudden strike with his blade. She smiles coldly, pointing out that his split-second reaction and his unique needle-like sword have completely given him away. She looks him in the eyes, telling him that he cannot deceive her eyes. She coldly commands him to forfeit the upcoming match. She warns him not to make her ruin his future in the ring. Arhan glares back, asking what she will do if he says he still plans to participate. She turns her back, walking away into the sunset. She looks over her shoulder, coldly whispering that if he refuses, he will pay the ultimate price on the sand. Later that night, the Grand Colosseum stands quiet and empty under the moonlit sky. Tom, the caretaker of the Hall of Fame, stands in the courtyard looking at the display cases. Suddenly, he hears footsteps approaching and turns around with a smile, welcoming his guest. He greets the visitor, calling him young Master Arhan. Arhan steps into the courtyard, bowing politely and apologizing for visiting at such a late hour. He admits that even though he came completely unannounced, he has a rather shameful request to make. He looks at the legendary swords glowing behind the glass with his blue eyes filled with absolute resolve. He asks Tom if he could take one of the swords from the hall with him tonight. Arhan asks what would happen if he still decided to participate in the match. The Black Bride simply turns and walks away with her cape flowing behind her. She coldly warns him that if he goes through with it, he will pay the ultimate price. She looks back with a dark, threatening glare, telling him to judge wisely. She vanishes into the twilight, leaving her chilling words hanging in the air. Arhan stands alone in the empty street, staring at the empty path. Liam floats next to him, muttering that she possesses a talent far too great for this current era. He explains that most swordsmen hit a wall at Swordwalker and their life as a warrior ends right there. But for a monstrous genius like her, a wall like that would not even serve as a minor obstacle. In his mind, Arhan visualizes her spreading her wings, ascending to the next legendary realm. She is a true, undeniable genius whose talent is unreachably high. She is depicted with majestic white wings soaring high above the clouds. Arhan realizes that for his master, who is normally incredibly strict when evaluating swords, to praise her so highly means she is a real threat. He clenches his fist, knowing that his opponent has immense skills. For the current, the gap between their powers is a massive distant chasm. He stands in the quiet alley, with his heart pounding in anxiety. He looks at his master with his eyes burning with intense resolve as he prepares to make a move. Liam looks at him, noting that time is not waiting for them and they need to hurry. They walk down the busy street under the rising sun. They return to the Colosseum to find the second sword they need for Arhan's growth. He approaches the Hall of Fame meeting with Tom under the moonlight. He asks the old caretaker if he can borrow a sword from the hall. Tom looks completely taken aback, sweat dropping as he asks what the young master means. He looks at Arhan in silence, trying to process this unusual request. He asks if this request is perhaps related to his upcoming promotion match against the Black Bride. He points out that the news of the match is already making noise everywhere, since it is a duel between two very promising gladiators. He sighs, muttering that, to a rookie who has just sprouted in the arena, the organizers have played a truly nasty and unfair prank. Therefore, as a friend, he strongly recommends that Arhan reconsider and forfeit the match. He explains that she hails from the East Continent Youngwon, a place where supreme martial talent overflows. She graduated top of her class from Temple, proving her unmatched talent. And even here in the arena, she has already overwhelmed countless gladiators, acting as a genius in name and reality. He admits that Arhan is also a gladiator with excellent qualities, but it is just too early for him to face a raging wave like her. He offers his hand, promising that with more time, Arhan will be able to display an even more splendid safe match. Arhan stands in silence, listening to Tom's warnings. He looks down, declaring that he still intends to face her. He admits that he cannot fathom the height of her power, and his body is trembling with fear. But as a gladiator, avoiding combat due to fear is a disgrace he cannot accept. He declares that running away from his fears would be betraying his own heart. That is why, despite the shame, he came to borrow courage from this hall, so that he may receive the energy of the gladiators who fought greatly in the past. He looks at the glowing legendary sword displayed behind the glass. He promises that if he survives, he will be promoted and earn the right to officially claim a weapon. On the other hand, if he dies, Tom can just retrieve the sword. He looks at Tom with a serious, pleading expression, asking him to shake his head if he thinks this request is too foolish. He confesses that it is just his desperate greed to obtain even a handful of courage. Tom looks at the young master, completely moved by his sincere resolve. He stands in silence under the moonlight, looking at the display cases. He notes that according to the rules, lending out these weapons is absolutely impermissible. But as the manager who has protected the souls of the gladiators enshrined in this hall, he cannot bear to ignore Arhan's absolute sincerity. He smiles warmly, extending his hand and declaring that he will grant Arhan's request. Arhan is completely shocked, asking if he is really sure, worried that Tom might get into serious trouble because of him. Tom laughs, rubbing his eyes and saying that as he gets older, he only gets more tearful. Arhan bows deeply, thanking him from the bottom of his heart for his incredible kindness. Liam floats next to him, grinning and chuckling smugly. He whispers that Arhan has more talent in acting and persuasion than in the sword itself. Arhan's sweat drops, grumbling that if his master had taken up acting instead, they would have succeeded long ago. Tom opens the display case, confirming that with this all the conditions are met. He hands Arhan the glowing magical sword he selected, ready for him to devour. The next day, the Colosseum is packed with excited spectators under a clear sky. The crowd is cheering wildly, waiting for the highly anticipated match to begin. The announcer screams into the microphone, presenting the main event of the day, the silver promotion match. The Black Bride stands in the center of the ring with her black cape flowing in the wind. She looks back at the crowd with her face cold and silent. She remembers the arena organizers asking her to completely trample the rookie gladiator. They had requested that she cut off one of his arms or legs to make the show highly entertaining. She had scoffed, asking if they really expected her to accept such a disgusting, dishonorable proposal. She glared at them coldly, showing her absolute contempt. The organizers had quickly backed down, sweat dropping and apologizing for offending her. To bribe her, they had promised to give her the legendary Dragon Sword of the East, which they were keeping in storage. That sword holds a massive meaning for the swordsmen of the East, and it is the exact reason she has been fighting in the arena. The organizer had smiled slyly, knowing she could not refuse. She had stood in silence with her eyes locked on the legendary prize. The organizer had smiled, taking her silence as acceptance and wishing her a good match. Back in the present, the black bride stands on the sand with her curved blade ready. She realizes this was a proposal she simply could not refuse, and she must fight as a human, not a gladiator. Arhan steps onto the sand with his heavy boots making soft thuds. She glares at him under her mask, noting that, in the end, he still chose to show up. She addresses him coldly as the little gladiator. Arhan stands calmly holding his new sword and ready to face the challenge. She draws her magnificent curved blade, warning him that she gave him enough warnings. She warns him that what happens from now on is entirely his own fault. Arhan feels a sudden chilling aura radiating from her. A massive, dark, shadowy skull manifests behind her, radiating a terrible, thick smell of blood. Arhan stands frozen in shock, realizing this child possesses an unbelievably terrifying bloodlust. He looks at her, realizing she is a resident of the Free City crowd, a cold, cloaked killer who has willingly stained herself with blood. She is a true warrior who fought relentlessly just to reclaim her freedom. The red sunset reflects on the calm sea, casting a beautiful warm glow across the water. A stone lighthouse stands tall on the rocky cliff overlooking the ocean. This is the Free City of Crowd. This unique place split off from the ruined ancient republic, becoming one of the 6 famous free cities on the continent. At one point in history, it came to be called Paradise, and was a land renowned for its incredible beauty. However, how history recorded this land is completely meaningless now. We cannot live in the past. But the present-day Crowd is a dark, depressing place where freedom and hope have entirely vanished. The streets are narrow, gray, and worn, filled with a grim and gloomy atmosphere. It has become nothing more than a terrible, corrupted land where the poor are forced to beg on their knees. A young boy looks on with sad, hollow eyes as his family struggles to survive. It is a dark, depressing slum with no hope of escape. This deep shadow started with the immense corruption of the wealthy nobles. Clinking their glasses filled with fine wine, they indulged in a greed for luxury that could not be filled. Blinded by this limitless greed, they did the unthinkable. They signed contracts to sell the city's very territory to the foreign power, the Golden Empire. Eventually, they even used the citizens' basic human rights as collateral to borrow massive amounts of gold coins from the Red Bank. This meant the complete loss of the citizens' rights, dignity, and future. The common people were completely stripped of their lives, falling directly to the status of miserable slaves. Melly's tragic past continues as she remembers her father being beaten to death on the street while begging tourists for food. She remembers her mother being forced to sell her own body just so her children would not starve. And she remembers her young sister who died of a simple fever because they lacked just a few copper coins to buy medicine. She sat on her bed crying and asking why they must be stuck living their present days like this. But she eventually found her answer in a very unexpected, brutal place. She found it in front of a giant, terrifying guillotine at a public crowd execution ground. A blindfolded prisoner knelt before the blade, trembling in fear. His charge was assault. He was a common citizen who was unable to endure the suffering any longer and chose to resist. Originally, bloodshed was a daily sight in this corrupt city, but an outsider becoming the victim of a citizen's resistance was completely unprecedented. Thus, to appease the anger of the Grey Powers, the corrupt leaders ordered an immediate execution. The heavy blade of the guillotine came slamming down in a flash of blood. It was a punishment clearly unreasonable and a violence unmatched in its sheer unfairness. However, for the man who was once their neighbor, the watching crowd showed no room to feel any sort of sympathy. On the streets of Crowd, there were absolutely no screams. The next day and the day after that, the city was peaceful and seemingly quiet. An unfamiliar, dead silence continued to hang over the streets. The reason for this silence was truly simple. In the eyes of the outsiders, that day's incident made the citizens look like dangerous, volatile beings. They looked at them with suspicion, seeing them as potential threats, slaves who were hiding sharp, predatory fangs beneath their quiet submission. For the oppressed citizens, the charge was but one: the sin of not resisting. Meanwhile, the corrupt nobles laughed and toasted in their luxurious palaces, declaring that freedom always comes with a price. They believed that someone must spill blood and someone must be stained with blood. Watching their arrogance, Mealy decided to willingly become that someone. She gripped her sword hilt tightly under the moonlit sky, ready to make them pay. She swore to make them atone for the pain they forced everyone to bear. She stood tall under the massive full moon with her dark cloak flowing. She declared that her sword would fight for her paradise and her home. She drew her sharp daggers ready to strike from the shadows. Back in the present, the arena host yells into the microphone, presenting the sacred duel dedicated to the goddess Lepri. The crowd cheers as the Black Bride stands opposite the rookie gladiator, Liam. She glares at Arhan with her eyes narrowing as she analyzes her opponent. She remembers when she first saw him, thinking he had the air of a simple mercenary. But now he seems exactly like someone who has been stained with much blood while in the shadows, with an aura cold and sharp. She stands in silence with her curved eastern sword held loosely at her side. She waits for him to make his move on the stone platform. She admits to herself that this is indeed a highly difficult, confusing situation to understand, but she launches herself forward in a sudden blur of speed. She slashes her curved blade, but Arhan easily parries the strike. Their swords clash in a flash of blue energy. She is completely shocked to see her strike evaded. She glares with wide, disbelieving eyes, wondering how the hell he managed to dodge her sword. She realizes that dodging that attack should have been physically impossible for a rookie to even respond to. But Arhan leaps back, landing softly on the sand. Arhan stands firmly with his blue eyes locked onto her. She realizes with a chill that he is a completely different being from any other rookie she has faced. Arhan steps forward, raising his blade with extreme precision. He aims a lightning-fast counter-thrust directly at her head. She barely manages to duck with his sword tip grazing her hair. She swings her curved blade upward, forcing him to back away. The Black Bride stares at him through her mask, realizing that this time even his breathing and movements belong to someone else entirely. She is completely bewildered, wondering who on earth this boy actually is. The two gladiators clash in the center of the ring, with their blades creating sparks as they fight under the sky. Arhan draws his dagger with the metal gleaming in the light as he prepares to face the Black Bride. With a swift motion, she slashes her curved blade, but Arhan easily parries. They move in a complete blur, clashing and parrying with blinding speed. The Black Bride swings again with her eyes focused behind her veil. She slides across the stone floor with perfect balance. Arhan leaps up and counters with his stances shifting relentlessly. He moves with absolute fluidness, making it difficult for her to predict his next move and adding an extreme level of unpredictability. She is completely shocked to see how skilled he actually is. They clash, creating a massive explosion of light. Arhan glares under his mask, completely focused on surviving. He stands before her holding both his needle-thin sword and his dagger. He decides to charge forward, which she realizes with a chill is nothing but pure, dangerous foolhardiness. He unleashes a barrage of rapid thrusts with his weapons, creating streaks in the air. She parries his strikes, hoping he has more cards left to play. She matches his speed with their blades clashing with metallic rings. The entire Colosseum is filled with loud, excited cheers. Gamblers in the stands scream, celebrating that they bet their entire fortune on this rookie gladiator. Some spectators are completely stunned, asking if the little gladiator is on the verge of winning, while others remind them that he is up against the undefeated, monstrous Black Bride. They yell from the stands, pleading for Arhan not to die a boring death. Arhan keeps his breathing completely steady under his mask. He feels the thick scent of blood that seems to blanket this entire arena. He looks at the legendary sword Tom lent him, wondering what world Mealy's master Hegel used to see. Liam floats next to him, explaining that, though the female mercenary and Hegel lived completely different lives, their beloved swords share a very common, deep trait. They were both forged to stand against enemies infinitely stronger than oneself, making them swords of struggle. He tells Arhan that in a brutal world where the strong prey on the weak, for a rookie who has only just taken his first steps, he must never allow himself to be consumed by the sword's memories. Instead, he must understand and accept the blade's life and make it his own. Arhan takes a series of deep breaths, focusing his mana. Liam smiles, noting that he seems to have calmed down a bit. However, he warns that the true trial begins right now. That girl has completely grasped his capabilities during that brief clash. She will hunt him with all her might from now on. Arhan takes a defensive stance, knowing his current situation is disadvantageous. This is a massive open stone arena, without a single shadow to hide, and making his assassin-like stealth skills halved in their effectiveness. He realizes his best option right now is to secure a safe distance and buy as much time as possible. He leaps back, knowing the 3-minute time limit is a card in his favor. Arhan gasps in shock as she appears directly in front of him. He struggles to react to her incredible sudden speed. She unleashes a massive lightning-fast slash to close the distance in an instant. In the stands, Tom watches closely, sighing and muttering in concern. He explains that Arhan does not know the true power of a swordwalker yet. Swordwalkers project a path to suppress their opponents, not only constructing an advantageous domain of offense and defense, but they also expand that path internally to wield tremendous superhuman power. Arhan's eyes widen as she moves with her power completely overflowing. Her speed is incomparable to the start of the match. He barely manages to parry her heavy strike, with his sword shaking violently from the impact. He realizes this is the true power of the Black Bride. He struggles to catch his breath, realizing there should be an unavoidable opening the moment one resets their stance. But for her, that opening does not exist. Even as she seems to stop, her next attack is already following through. It is almost like she is painting a beautiful, lethal world upon a canvas. Her movements are fluid and precise, like the brushstrokes of a master painter. She swings her curved blade in a series of swift curves with the metal flashing. Her sword clashes against Arhan's blade with a loud metallic ring. Arhan barely manages to block with his hands trembling violently. Liam explains that swordsmen from the East Continent use a style of swordsmanship called martial arts, which often displays mysterious movements resembling nature itself. She moves with perfect circular momentum, crashing down with a series of heavy strikes. She slides her blade down, completely deflecting his weapon. She tells him that the moment those movements stop, the fight ends. He sweat drops, realizing his guard has been completely shattered. Swirling lines of blue mana wrap around her blade once more. She prepares to deliver the final, decisive end. She thrusts her sword straight toward his chest. We return to the dark, rain-slicked streets of Crowd. This is a city that has completely rotted from the inside out. Here, a nameless assassin lived a life entirely dedicated to reclaiming their freedom, but that path is always stained with blood. When you live by the blade, death is constantly rising right up to your chin. Fighting a losing battle against the corrupt bureaucrats of this land, they were left with no options. In the end, they were forced to shoulder the heavy burden of running away. They ran through the dark alleys with their breath ragged as they desperately sought a way out. But running only gets you so far before you hit a dead end. There will not always be an escape route waiting when you reach the end of your run. Trapped in a silent stone dead end, the assassin turns to face their pursuer. And their opponent is someone they cannot even dare to stand against. A terrifying, red-eyed monster of a warrior whose sheer presence radiates death. Instinctively, the assassin knew their limits were entirely reached. They realized that today would be the day their life finally came to an end. With a desperate leap, they threw themselves forward into a massive clash of steel. The giant blade comes crashing down with overwhelming power. But in that split second of impending doom, something incredible happens. They somehow find the unique pattern within this struggle. It is the exact rhythm that always allowed them to escape overwhelming violence. With a swift stomp of their foot, they pivot instantly. The giant sword smashes the stone ground, leaving a massive crater behind. Utilizing the momentum, the assassin flips gracefully through the air. They twist their body with their cloak trailing like a shadow. They realize that this lethal exchange is exactly what they need to thrive. With a blindingly fast slash, they strike right back at their opponent. The powerhouse warrior is left frozen in shock as blood splatters from the graze. Blood sprays in the air as the assassin lands perfectly on their feet. Back in the present, the Black Bride watches Arhan with a complex expression. She remembers how her brothers used to mock her and call her a certain name. They called her a genius, a prodigy who stood above everyone else. Yet she is utterly stunned that a mere rookie managed to pierce through her path in a split second. Arhan stands on the sand, clutching his heavily bruised side. He realizes that the opponents Mary faced back then were all high-class walker powerhouses. Even though she landed a hit, the Black Bride still managed to avoid a fatal wound and counterattack. As a result, Arhan's ribs feel like they are about to shatter from the impact. With his body failing and any hope of a conventional victory gone forfeiting, seems like the only logical choice. The crowd watches in tense silence, wondering if the rookie will finally yield. Even caretaker Tom looks on from the stands, hoping the kid chooses his survival over pride. But as Arhan slowly tightens his grip on his sword hilt, his resolve does not waver. He stands tall because he is a caravan. For his family, backing down and taking the easy way out has never been an option. The host looks absolutely dumbfounded by the sheer tenacity of this bronze rookie. This is no longer a simple rookie stomping. This has turned into a legendary trial. Arhan's eyes burn with a brilliant, unyielding light. The host screams into his microphone, asking the roaring audience if they are witnessing history. There are only 10 seconds left in this brutal match. The Black Bride lowers her head, focusing her aura for one final decisive clash. Arhan drops into a low, predatory stance, ready to give it everything. Above him, the spectral form of Liam Caravan watches with a proud, solemn look. The ancestor looks down, ready to see his descendant break through his limits. He wonders what it truly means to be a hero in this unforgiving world. With a massive burst of speed, both gladiators charge and clash in the center. Arhan somehow finds the perfect answer amidst the chaos sliding past her defense. He spins fluidly, turning his desperate struggle into a beautiful arc of steel. He leaps high, determined to engrave his name into the annals of this Colosseum. The Black Bride's eyes widen as she realizes her unmatched genius has fallen short. He remembers his father's words about his frail body and slow martial comprehension. While others easily mastered 10 things, Arhan had to struggle to grasp even a few. That was the frustrating limit of the physical vessel he was born with. But those who struggle and never give up despite their limits are the ones who truly become legends in the end. They are the ones who create massive, unstoppable ripples in history. A single drop of blood falls, echoing the birth of a new hero. The true hero of tribulation, Arhan Caravan. Even when he lost absolutely everything and was left entirely alone in the dark, he refused to ever let go of his sword. His fierce determination burns brighter than any innate genius. With a sudden sharp crack, his blade strikes her mask directly. A blinding explosion of blue light engulfs the center of the ring. Behind the shattering mask, the Black Bride's eye is wide with pure disbelief. Arhan leaps backward to the dust with his focus absolute. He has finally proven that he possesses the genuine qualities of a hero. The Black Bride's mask completely shatters, revealing her stunned face. The broken pieces of the mask and the sword fly through the air. She stands frozen, unable to process how her ultimate defense was breached. Arhan executes his bizarre, dancer-like movements to perfection. Before she can recover her stance, his blade slides right past her guard. A massive spray of blood erupts as he delivers a decisive, non-lethal slash. Arhan lets out a wild, breathless grin under his mask. The undefeated queen of the arena looks down at her wound in complete shock. High above, the spirit of Liam Caravan smiles proudly at his descendant. With her strength completely exhausted, the Black Bride falls forward, collapsing directly against Arhan. The entire Colosseum erupts in wild, roaring cheers as the host declares Liam the winner. The announcer screams into the microphone, declaring that our boy Liam has officially been promoted to silver rank. He is moving up in the world under the blessing of the goddess Lepre. The entire Colosseum goes completely wild, shouting and celebrating the birth of their newest arena star. Arhan sits on the sand, catching his breath as blood drips from his cracked mask. He survived, but he is absolutely running on fumes right now. The Black Bride stands tall over his slumped body, staring down with her curved sword in hand. Her cold eyes narrow behind her veil as she mutters how difficult it is to hold back when she draws her blade. She tightly grips her hilt, admitting that it has been a very long time since she has felt this thrilled. She stands over him, deeply curious about this mysterious rookie who actually managed to land a scratch on her. Arhan finally loses consciousness with his head tilting back as he slumps onto the blood-stained sand. Up in the VIP stands the corrupt arena promoter, is furious, claiming this stunt was not part of their original contract. He sits on his luxurious throne, ordering his guards to go cut off Arhan's arm as a trophy. Talk about a sore loser. He reminds her that if she wants the legendary dragon sword of the East, she has to play by his rules. The promoter screams at her to execute his orders immediately and take the kid's arm. She stares at the promoter, muttering a single cold word under her breath. With a sharp click, she sheathes her curved sword, calling them all disgusting fools. She turns her back on the VIP box, deciding she needs to leave this corrupt place for a while. But as she prepares to walk away, a massive swirl of blue spiritual energy begins gathering around the arena floor. She stops in her tracks with her eyes widening in sheer shock as she senses the sudden pressure. She whips around to see a massive, glowing blue pillar of spiritual force bursting right out of Arhan's body. She trembles, sweating, as she desperately tries to understand what she is seeing. Looming over the unconscious boy, the gigantic, glowing spirit of the ancestor Liam Caravan has fully materialized. The old master calmly looks down, realizing his presence has leaked out. He wonders if it is because his young descendant lost consciousness, or because the boy fought so fiercely. He looks directly at the Black Bride, noting with a smile that she can actually see him. He addresses her warmly, calling her a young girl of the East. He notes that although they are rare Eastern shamans with powerful divine senses can occasionally perceive spirits, he explains that her talent is truly incredible to have her spiritual senses open alongside her martial prowess. He points out that what she is witnessing is a phenomenon that only those at the absolute peak of the sword can manifest. A brilliant blue blade manifests in his hand, the legendary Mind Sword. He mentions Carlos, the master of the 10 swords, who could only manifest a handful of these spiritual blades. Suddenly, the entire sky behind Liam is filled with dozens, hundreds, and thousands of glowing blue swords. They are filling the entire sky like an endless sea of stars, completely blowing her mind. The old ancestor stands proudly amidst his infinite domain, showing her the ultimate power of the caravans. He tells her that while she still lacks the capability to comprehend this realm, her talent means she will surely reach it one day. He welcomes her to gaze upon the land of swords, the final destination of all blades. With a soft sigh, his spectral body begins to dissolve into glowing particles of light. He smiles, telling her that he looks forward to the day they meet again. The name of Selyun echoes softly through the dispersing wind. She stands frozen in the empty arena, watching the blue spiritual particles fade into the sky. She is completely speechless, with her heart hammering against her chest. The overwhelming vision has left her breathless, realizing she just witnessed a god. She remembers her childhood back in the East, where legends spoke of sword masters ascending to the land of immortals. She recalls her quiet wish to reach that mythical pinnacle so her family could be together without regrets. She had wept back then, holding on to a seemingly impossible dream. But now she realizes the legend is entirely real. It actually exists. She looks up at the sky with her heart filled with a burning desire to reach the god of swords. The clouds drift peacefully over the Colosseum, marking the end of a legendary duel. Later that day, we cut to the quiet corridors of the arena's medical wing. The wooden sign on the door confirms we are outside the recovery room. Inside, a set of folded white clothes sits neatly on the wooden chest. Arhan sits up on his bed with his chest tightly wrapped in medical bandages, looking completely confused. Standing by his side, she introduces herself by her true name, Seo-yun, and declares she wishes to follow him. She explains that her ultimate dream is to reach the pinnacle of the sword, and following him is the fastest way. She looks at him with absolute sincerity, with her dark eyes completely focused. Arhan is having a full-blown existential crisis right now. He is sweating bullets trying to figure out if this is some crazy trick. Suddenly, the spirit of Liam pops up behind him, explaining that she met him face to face yesterday. The old ancestor smiles and winks smugly, thoroughly enjoying how utterly captivated she was. He proudly notes that since ancient times, anyone walking the path of the sword would become his follower just by catching his shadow. He looks down with a slightly softer expression, with his tone turning reflective. Arhan sighs, watching his master float casually in the medical room. Liam looks at Arhan, admitting that he occasionally feels a deep sense of pity for the boy. He notes that at Arhan's age, it is only natural to romance a pretty girl and discover the simple joys of life. Instead, Arhan is forced to cling to cold, bloody swords and a cruel destiny. The weight of his family's slaughter keeps him trapped in a dark, violent shadow. But there is simply no other option for them. The old master grits his teeth, knowing the reality of their quest for vengeance. He reminds Arhan that once a path is chosen, all lingering regrets must be cast away. He tells him that a hesitant gaze is only for weak boys, and he is Arhan the Avenger. He advises him to judge for himself whether Seo-yun is truly worthy of joining him. Arhan looks at her, realizing she is a monstrous genius whose talent even his master praised. He thinks that if she wants to utilize him for her goals, she will also be an incredible asset for his own revenge. He takes a deep breath, deciding to accept her proposal. He smiles warmly, introducing himself by his real name and welcoming Seo-yun as his companion. She smiles back softly, looking forward to their journey together. The gears of destiny are finally starting to turn. We open on a carriage bumping along a rugged dirt road under a clear sky. The journey is anything but smooth. Inside, Arhan and Seo-yun are sitting opposite each other. Arhan awkwardly clears his throat, wanting to get something out of the way before things get misunderstood. Seo-yun looks at him, calmly admitting that she has some unspeakable, highly complicated circumstances of her own. So, before he gets any ideas, she drops a massive bombshell that she cannot become his lover. Oof, talk about getting friend-zoned before you even ask. Arhan is completely deflated, sweat dropping like crazy, as she casually notes that while she knows he has no such intentions, they are still young people who do not know where life will take them. She looks at him, saying that while it is a completely reasonable concern, he absolutely does not have to worry. She leans in close, with her eyes narrowing as she delivers the ultimate final blow. He is not her type. Arhan is left completely speechless, clutching his face in sheer embarrassment, while his ancestor Liam is in the background, laughing his head off. Seo-yun lists her ideal type, claiming she only likes tall, muscular, rugged guys with strong features and absolutely detests scrawny, weak-looking boys. She adds that Arhan's impression is way too soft-looking, like the type of guy who would apologize first, even if someone else picked a fight with him. Talk about emotional damage. She smiles smugly, asking if she should say any more. Arhan looks like he wants the ground to swallow him whole. Arhan can only let out a weak, twitchy laugh, trying his absolute best to ignore his ancestor's mocking giggles. As the carriage wheels continue to roll, Arhan desperately changes the subject, asking if he can clarify some things about his village too. Seo-yun holds up 2 fingers, asking if there are other neighbors around since Arhan mentioned she was only the second. He confirms that a knight recently moved in. Arhan smiles, telling her that she should be able to get along with him incredibly well. He proudly boasts about the knight's unmatched skills and his exceptionally wonderful, kind personality. We see a flashback of Sir Petal standing alone on a brutal, bloody battlefield surrounded by fallen foes. Despite his formidable power, he was a truly honorable and warm-hearted knight who sought only a peaceful end. The carriage finally arrives at the borders of the caravan territory, traveling down a quiet dirt path through the thick forest. Arhan is heavily loaded down with a massive backpack, while Seo-yun walks light as a feather, causing him to ask if that is really all of her luggage. She calmly replies that a sword and a single day's worth of food are more than enough for her, leaving Arhan sweat dropping in disbelief. She looks down at the newly purchased daggers lining his belt. Arhan explains that his previous weapon got damaged during their intense promotion match, so he bought some spares while visiting the city's famous smithies. He adds that thanks to his increased winnings from reaching silver rank, he was also able to purchase some protective armor he was lacking. His sturdy new leather boots and leg guards clank softly with every step he takes. Arhan grumbles about how incredibly expensive the gear was, but Liam floats next to him telling him to stop whining because good equipment is vital for a greenhorn. They finally round the corner, and Arhan proudly presents the grand caravan mansion where he stays. But the moment Arhan looks at his courtyard, his face completely freezes in shock. Solyun looks on as Arhan's sweat drops, realizing things have taken a very bad turn while they were away. The entire courtyard is covered in the bloody, defeated bodies of armed bandits, and Sir Petal is standing calmly in the center. Sir Petal wipes some blood from his face, looking a bit embarrassed as he welcomes them back. He apologizes for the messy sight, explaining that some uninvited guests arrived recently and he has not had the time to clean up. He suddenly lets out a violent cough, causing Arhan to panic and beg him to take a moment to catch his breath. Seolyun narrows her eyes, silently analyzing the retired knight's movements and his lingering injuries. The lifeless face of a defeated bandit lies in the dirt, a testament to Sir Petal's overwhelming martial skills. Arhan leads Seolyun toward the main entrance, feeling the weight of the sudden tension. She looks up at the grand stone architecture, noting that this is definitely not an ordinary landlord's home. They head inside through the double doors, leaving the bloody courtyard behind. They sit down in the spacious drawing room, ready to listen to Sir Petal's explanation. Petal pours them some fresh drinking water with his face serious. He explains that quite a few uninvited guests have visited their territory over the past week. Fortunately, most of them backed down obediently after a warning, so it never escalated into a major fight. But the real problem started when a completely different group of bandits began targeting the village. Despite trying his best to send them back peacefully, their hostility was on a different level. Today, they launched a coordinated attack completely determined to destroy everything. Therefore, Sir Petal had no choice but to shed blood to protect their home. He takes a slow sip of water, noting that judging by their tactics, they are definitely not ordinary bandits. They identified themselves as members of the notorious Red Wolf Brotherhood. Arhan looks serious, pointing out that using a color and animal combination is usually a naming convention reserved for formal knighthoods. Patel confirms his theory, explaining that noble knighthoods use names like Blue Lion or White Snake to embody their identity and honor. Because of that, he finds it highly displeasing that lawless bandits are daring to imitate such a prestigious tradition. He touches his own knightly pendant with his eyes turning cold. He warns Arhan that they need to be exceptionally careful dealing with this group. Using such a prestigious naming convention means they are either massive in size or their leader possesses skills so great that he looks down on knights entirely. A fierce image of the muscular bandit leader shows him holding a massive bloody blade. In the background, the spirit of Liam Caravan begins to grin with a wild excitement. Liam chuckles warmly, finding the situation absolutely perfect. He commands Arhan with a surge of blue spiritual energy, calling this a feast prepared just for him. He yells for his descendant to go wipe out those arrogant wolves solely with his own strength, without any help. Arhan sweats, grumbling internally that he knew his strict master would cook up some ridiculous training like this. He thinks of the sheer danger of facing an entire army of armed bandits whose exact combat power has not even been gauged. But Liam reminds him of the Caravan Creed. A body of steel is forged to be stronger the more it is beaten. There is no better opportunity for him to digest his powers than this. Liam stands tall, ready to see his descendant throw himself into the fire once more. Arhan leans forward, setting down his cup as a sharp look returns to his eyes. Sir Petal looks at him, waiting for his response. Arhan's blue eyes glow with a deadly focus as he asks Sir Petal for the exact location of the bandits' hideout. The hunt is officially on. We find ourselves in the southern Verde mountain range of the Iron Kingdom. The dense dark woods look quiet, but trouble is definitely brewing. A group of heavily armed bandits treks through the forest under the cover of night, complaining about their current assignment. The lead bandit grips a blazing torch, grumbling that he does not understand their captain's weird tastes or why they had to set up camp in a total dump like this. Another bandit walks closely behind him, guessing that their captain must have gotten interested in some local rumors. The third bandit scoffs, asking if they actually believe that stupid rumor about a black magician living in the area. He points out that the place is nothing but a rundown ghost village with absolutely nothing worth taking. The bandits stomp through the mud, complaining that they want to go back to the previous village where they could cause some real trouble. They fondly remember the horrific fun they had, pillaging and terrorizing the helpless villagers there. One bandit boasts that if they had stayed just a little longer, he could have claimed 10 wives like the famous Steel Count. A grease-stained bandit licks his lips creepily, claiming that just thinking about those days gets him all hot. He laughs insanely, declaring that he is seriously at his limit after being stuck in his boring dump for so long. Suddenly, a splash of fresh blood cuts his laughter short. Before he can even process it, his partner's decapitated head falls directly to the ground. The remaining bandit stops raising his torch as he calls out to his partner. He whips his head around with his face pale as he realizes his partner has completely vanished. Out of absolutely nowhere, Arhan descends from the trees like a silent predator with his black cloak billowing behind him. The bandit gasps in shock as he catches a glimpse of the cold hooded face looming above. He screams in terror, demanding to know what kind of monster has just ambushed them. In a split second, Arhan sweeps past him, delivering a lightning-fast kick that shatters his leg. The bandit crashes hard into the dirt, coughing up blood in agony. He lies helplessly in the mud, trembling and wondering if the rumors of the legendary black magician were actually true. Arhan stands coldly over him with his hood casting a dark shadow over his face as his glowing blade catches the moonlight. With a fluid, brutal slash, he finishes off the second bandit as blood sprays across the trees. The terrified bandit weeps, completely unable to break free from his iron grip. Arhan leans in close with his face cold as he commands him to swallow his screams if he wants to survive. The bandit trembles, realizing with a chill that this terrifying entity is not some black magician at all. He looks up with wide, teary eyes, realizing to his absolute horror that his attacker is just a kid. But seeing the glowing blue rings inside the boy's eyes completely shatters his sanity. Arhan calmly tells him he has a lot of questions. Under the bright full moon, Arhan coldly warns him to cooperate if he wants to keep what is left of his ankles. The campfire in the dark woods flickers as Arhan begins his interrogation. We flash back to earlier that day in the mansion's living room. Sir Petal is shocked to hear Arhan asking about the hideout. Arhan explains that he also wants to know their fighting style and specific characteristics. Sir Petal remains silent. Petal looks at him with deep concern, asking if he is seriously planning to go wipe out their entire group alone. Arhan keeps his face completely blank, offering no response. Sir Petal slams his hand on the table, standing up and yelling at the boy for attempting something so incredibly reckless. He insists that even if they attack again, it would be far wiser to stay here and defend the estate. He explains that since the bandits have insulted a knight's honor, the official knight order will likely move to subjugate them soon anyway. He gasps, claiming there is absolutely no reason for Arhan to risk his own life, but his voice suddenly cuts short. Petal falls to his knees, clutching his chest as a violent coughing fit racks his entire body. His agonizing coughs echo through the quiet halls of the mansion. Arhan and Soyun rush to his side, helping him sit back up as they check his condition. Petal wipes the fresh blood from his mouth, whispering that those men are no ordinary bandits, and they definitely have a hidden trump card. Back in the present, Arhan stands in the dark, pulling his hood over his face as he whispers an apology to Sir Petal. He knows he promised to stay safe, but leaving such a massive threat at their doorstep is simply not an option. The dead bandit lies face up on the ground with his life extinguished in a pool of fresh blood. Arhan stands silently in the dark woods, the absolute master of the shadows. Liam floats next to him, chuckling and noting that his descendant has gotten quite used to the brutal laws of this kingdom. The ancestor watches with pride as Arhan prepares for the upcoming battle. Arhan adjusts his leather gauntlets with his face completely calm and focused. He grips his sword hilt, declaring that he simply refuses to leave any future trouble behind him. Soyun steps out of the bushes, asking if he is truly okay with proceeding, since their leader is not some ordinary bandit. She explains that according to the information she dug up, their captain is a highly dangerous man. Known among knights as the Runaway Dog, he is a ruthless, battle-hardened deserter, a terrifying warrior who has officially reached the superhuman realm of the Swordwalker. Soyun looks at him, pointing out that she has already lost to Swordwalkers twice in her past. She asks if that does not worry him. Arhan looks back at her with a calm, piercing glare, asking if a detail like that should even matter. Liam Caravan stands proudly in the background with a wild grin on his spectral face as he listens to his descendants' resolve. Arhan lets out a quiet, confident smile. He turns and walks deeper into the dark forest under the bright, full moon, completely ready to face his trial. Behind him, the silent trail of defeated bandits lies scattered across the dirt road. We cut back to the mansion where Sir Patel has finally fallen asleep on the sofa under the moonlight. The drawing room is quiet, with the cool night breeze rustling through the open window. Despite his fearsome reputation, the old knight looks peaceful and fragile in his sleep. In his dreams, Petal remembers his glorious youth standing under a blooming cherry blossom tree as a proud guardian. He recalls the warm, happy smiles of the people who trusted and admired his unyielding loyalty. He had sworn to stand as an invincible shield to protect everyone he cared about. But back in the present, his sleeping face suddenly contorts in agonizing pain. The glowing purple magical corruption flares violently across his chest. Suddenly, Soyun's voice snaps him awake, warning him that an uninvited guest has arrived. Petal struggles to stand, grumbling that his useless body had to fail him at the worst possible time. Soyun tells him not to worry, with her face completely calm as she holds her blade. Outside the mansion gates, a grand white banner showing a purple elephant flags in the night wind. A massive, heavily armored platoon of elite knights on white war horses stands in the courtyard. The heavy steel armor of the horses clanks as they halt in front of the steps. The led knight looks up at the mansion with his face hidden behind his massive steel helmet. He coldly announces that he is searching for the notorious runaway dog. He demands to know if they have seen him introducing himself as Meekin, the vice-captain of the Yellow Elephant Knight Order. Vice-Captain Meekin stands in front of the mansion gates, flanked by his elite Yellow Elephant Knights under the dark night sky. Sir Petal stands outside to greet him, calmly explaining everything he knows about the lawless Red Wolf Brotherhood. Petal looks at the heavily armored knights, asking if they have come all this way specifically to wipe out that bandit group. Meekin sits arrogantly on his horse, confirming that the rumors of the runaway dog pillaging the borderlands have reached all the way to the capital. He looks incredibly annoyed, complaining that the deserter naming his bandit group Red Wolf has made their entire Night Order look like complete fools. Meekin sighs, pointing out that Petal's information is not actually much help since he only knows they are somewhere in the Yasa Mountains. He grumbles that without an exact location or the scale of their forces, his knights are the ones who have to suffer doing all this dirty work. Sir Petal bows, politely apologizing for not being of more help while Seolyeon stands silently beside him. Meekin touches his chin, squinting at Sir Petal as a look of recognition washes over his face. He asks if Petal was once a senior at their academy. Sir Petal flinches slightly, with his past catching up to him in the worst way possible. We see a flashback of Sir Petal in his prime as a legendary knight revered for his incredible skill and unyielding loyalty. Meekin bursts into a mocking, nasty laugh, recalling that even though Petal was just a swordwalker, he managed to become quite famous back then. He looks down at the retired veteran with absolute contempt. He mockingly recalls his title, Petal the Loyal of the Green Deer, the absolute example of an honorable knight who carried out any order without question. His smile turns incredibly cruel as he sneers that Petal is now nothing but an abandoned dog whose master threw him away. A sick, dying dog left to rot in the borderlands with some incurable disease. Meekin chuckles, bragging that this pathetic encounter will make for an excellent drinking story once he returns to the capital. He glares at Petal, asking if he has a problem with a junior who does not know how to show his seniors proper respect. Sir Petal grinds his teeth in silence, suppressing his anger as he politely replies that it is nothing. We see a flashback of young Petal's glory days under the roaring banners of his Night Order. Meekin sneers, telling him that even while rotting away from his illness, he is still foolishly clinging to his ridiculous dreams. The armored knights look on in silence as Meekin tells him he should have accepted his pathetic destiny long ago. Petal stands in the dark shadows of the courtyard, silently enduring the humiliation. Beside him, Seolyeon's face is completely shadowed with rage as her hand creeps toward her dagger hilt. But Sir Petal quickly grabs her arm, telling her to stand down. He whispers that in this kingdom, power is law, and getting into a fight with the official knights will only bring ruin. Meekin laughs, mockingly praising Patel for being such a good caretaker to a pretty little girl from the eastern continent. He turns his white warhorse around, claiming that this pathetic little reunion was entertaining enough. He raises his sword, commanding the Yellow Elephant Knights to move out and hunt down the runaway dog before sunrise. The knights ride off into the dark forest, leaving a cloud of dust behind them as Patel watches in silence. Sir Petal stares at the ground with a look of profound defeat on his face. He covers his eyes, muttering about how hopelessly stubborn and foolish he is to still care about his honor. Suddenly, Seolyeon gasps, realizing a major inconsistency. She asks Petal where young Master Arhan is, pointing out that there is no way he would not have come out to check on such a massive commotion. They stand in tense silence as the realization hits them. Sir Petal's eyes go wide in absolute shock. The dark, ominous mountains loom under the full moon as they realize Arhan has gone straight to the bandit den alone. Back at the bandit camp, two guards are standing near a torch, complaining about having to stand guard on such a gloomy night. They hear soft approaching footsteps in the dark and assume their night search team is finally returning. One of the guards peers into the dark path, trying to make out the silhouette. The silhouette draws closer, but something about their posture looks completely wrong. Suddenly, the guide bandit Arhan captured falls forward with snot and tears streaming down his face as he stammers that he did what he was told. In a flash of cold light, Arhan's blade slices right through the guide's throat, silencing him forever. The guided bandit collapses into the dirt with blood spraying across the night. The remaining guard stands completely frozen with his eyes wide in absolute terror. Before he can even raise his spear, Arhan sweeps past in a blinding blue flash of steel. The guard collapses face down on the ground with his life extinguished in a single second. Arhan stands silently in the dark with his blue eyes glowing as he realizes why his master chose Fang's dagger for him. He remembers Liam's teachings. Compared to the seasoned gladiators of the arena, Fang was not a conventional powerhouse, but in a brutal life-or-death fight to the finish, his stealth and underhanded techniques make him a god. Inside one of the tents, a bandit guard is sleeping soundly, completely unaware of the shadow looming over him. Fang's core philosophy was simple. Wait for a lapse and guard and strike at the weakest point. With absolute precision, Arhan drives his dagger straight down through the sleeping bandit's throat. He slips silently back out of the leather tent, leaving no trace behind. He glides through the dark camp like a literal ghost. Several dead bandits lie silent in pools of blood. In a fight to the death, the one who strikes first is the one who survives. Arhan wipes the blood from his face, completely focused on his bloody work. His mind plans meticulously for every possible failure, crafting a flawless victory from the shadows. Another heavily drunk bandit stumbles out of his tent, completely dazed. He laughs, stupidly complaining about how fuzzy his head feels after drinking so much. But before he can finish his sentence, Arhan's blade drives straight through his forehead in a flash of fresh blood. The dead bandit collapses to the ground without making a single sound. Arhan calmly cleans his blade, completely unbothered by the carnage around him. He stands amidst the fallen bandits with the camp completely silenced. Now it is finally time to hunt the wolf. Deep inside the main cave, the giant muscular bandit captain sits on his throne. His glowing red eyes narrow in the darkness. He slowly stands up with his red eyes burning with rage as he sniffs the air and detects the thick scent of blood. We return to the quiet bandit camp where several campfires burn under the silent, starry night. Suddenly, a surviving bandit stumbles out of his tent, sweating and looking completely panicked. He runs into the adjacent tent to grab his allies but is instantly frozen by the horrific bloodbath waiting inside. Another bandit runs in screaming in absolute horror as he looks at his dead comrades who were just drinking with them a moment ago. They check the other tents, realizing to their absolute horror that every single one of their men has been quietly taken down. A closer look at the bodies reveals a single clean slit across each of their throats. Every single bandit died instantly, completely unaware of the shadow that had slipped into their tents. One of the survivors screams in pure panic, realizing that taking down this many men without causing a single commotion is definitely not the work of an ordinary fighter. But as he yells, a massive shadow looms directly behind him in the dark. He slowly turns around, sweating in sheer terror, as his captain asks why the hell they are making such a damn fuss. This is the brutal captain of the Red Wolf Brotherhood, Murphy. His red eyes glow in the dark as he sniffs the air, noting that the smell of fresh blood is getting awfully strong. Murphy looks down at his panicking men, declaring that it seems something pretty interesting has just happened in their camp. With a heavy thud, his steel boot stomps on the ground as he growls that he does not care what little rat has crawled out of the dark. Red aura begins to crackle around his body as he smiles, savagely eager to tear their intruder apart. His thick crimson energy expands outward, swirling through the trees like dark branches. The massive sensory aura continues to expand, searching for any signs of life. Hiding behind one of the tents, Arhan calmly watches the energy expand, counting the remaining guards. He grips his dagger, noting there are only 6 left. Liam floats beside him, asking what he thinks after observing the captain's path. Arhan's blue eyes lock onto the giant captain, showing zero fear. With absolute confidence, he whispers that he can kill him. A diagram shows a glowing blue core, the mana heart of a swordwalker. By expanding their path, a warrior can transcend normal human limitations. By extending this path internally, they gain physical abilities far beyond anything an ordinary sword beginner can compare to. And when projected outward, it forms an invisible radar that senses enemies and amplifies their strength within that domain. In other words, a walker's path is both a powerful sensory organ and a highly tactical weapon. The refinement level of this path represents the true skill and rank of a swordwalker. But as Arhan analyzes the chaotic, unstable crimson threads emanating from Murphy, Liam notes with a chuckle that compared to Sir Petal and Seolyun, this man's skill is utterly pitiful. A visualization of Sir Petal's path shows countless branches that are perfectly straight and unshakable, and Seolyun's path is a majestic, overwhelming force resembling a raging tide. But Murphy's path consists of only 6 unstable branches, making him a bottom-tier swordwalker. Arhan realizes that this man does not even belong on the same level as the 2 geniuses he faced before. He lets out a confident grin under his hood. Liam agrees, noting that Seolyun is a once-in-a-century genius, and Petal reached the very peak of a walker before his illness. He chuckles, praising his young descendant for surviving against such powerhouses. But he warns Arhan that knowing their level does not automatically determine life or death in a real fight. Arhan's blue eyes flash with focus, telling his master not to worry. He melts back into the shadows, refusing to let his guard down for even a second. Back in the camp, Murphy sits on his bench surrounded by his remaining guards. One of the guards stammers in a panic, asking what they should do now. He mutters that the rumors of the Black Magician must be true because nobody else could have done something so horrific. Murphy grinds his teeth, telling them to shut their mouths before he rips them in half. He glares at them, calling them a group of incompetent bastards. The guards shiver in terror as his bloodlust fills the room. Murphy points at one of the dead bodies, asking them to look closer at the wounds. He explains that every single one of their men was killed with a single precise strike to a vital point. No dark magician would ever utilize such clean, assassin-like techniques. He concludes that this is the work of a single, highly skilled assassin. He notes that since he cannot sense the intruder with his own path, the rat has already hidden himself. He clenches his fist around his massive sword hilt with his eyes burning with rage. The guards tremble, taking his warning to heart. They run off into the dark camp, desperately shouting that they will find him. Murphy sits back down, wondering who could have hired an assassin of this high caliber. He smiles wickedly, wondering if it is the family of one of the women he had his fun with, or perhaps the remnants of the merchants he beat to death. He chuckles, claiming that whatever the reason, he has found a new source of entertainment. But as he laughs, a sudden splash of fresh blood drips onto the floor right in front of him. He turns around to find both of his personal bodyguards lying dead in pools of blood. His face completely freezes in shock. While he was busy talking, Arhan had silently slipped behind his guards and slit their throats without making a single sound. He stares at his dead elite guards, wondering how the hell this happened so quickly. A cold sweat runs down his face as he looks around. He stands completely alone in the center of his camp. Every single campfire has been extinguished, leaving him trapped in total darkness. He grinds his teeth, screaming out for the little rat to show himself. He scans the dark tree line with his red eyes darting around. Suddenly, a faint blue glow catches his attention in the bushes. With a furious roar, he swings his giant blade, cutting through the air. But Arhan easily leaps over the massive swing with his movements fluid and silent. He lands gracefully on a branch behind the giant captain with blood dripping from his dagger. Murphy gasps, touching his bleeding cheek in utter disbelief. He looks at the fresh blood on his fingers as Arhan prepares for his next strike. He realizes with a chill that if his reaction had been even half a beat slower, his head would be rolling on the dirt right now. He stares into the dark shadows, sweating, as he realizes this kid has completely integrated himself with the darkness. Arhan's blue eyes shine behind his hood, fully inheriting the legacy of Feng. The legendary assassin of Crowd has returned, and the ultimate hunt is reaching its climax. We return to the southern Verde mountain range under the cold glow of the full moon. Sir Petal and Saelyun are running through the dark forest, desperate to locate their young master. Patel is panting heavily, gasping for air as his terminal illness continues to eat away at his strength. Soyun looks at him with deep concern, advising him to take a rest. But Patel insists they must find Arhan immediately, as the bandits are not opponents he can face alone. He warns her that even though Arhan's talent is dazzling, he is still just a freshly sprouted seedling who cannot hope to survive a swordwalker. Petal's face is drenched in cold sweat, with his panic growing by the second. But Saelyun looks on with a calm, serious expression, stating that she does not think so. Petal looks back in surprise as she declares that the little gladiator is no mere seedling. She stands proudly under the moonlight, stating that Arhan's true talent has already begun to bloom. Back at the bandit camp, Murphy glares at the hooded intruder, guessing he must be a rather expensive assassin. He demands to know who sent him, with his face contorted in rage. He wonders if it was a merchant group they looted, or one of the women he tossed aside. Arhan remains completely silent, with his glowing blue eyes staring back through his hood. With a slow, heavy scraping sound, Murphy draws his giant sword. He smiles savagely, claiming that if the kid can actually hold out, this fight will be highly entertaining. The cold forest wind rustles through the trees as the two face off. With a silent, fluid motion, Arhan slides his boots along the stone ground. Murphy's eyes widen, slightly surprised by the boy's flawless stance. The young master stands ready to strike, holding his dual daggers in a low guard. Murphy stares at his slender opponent with his initial caution quickly turning into contempt. He bursts into a roaring, mocking laugh, realizing that the assassin who wiped out all of his men is nothing but a greenhorn still wet behind the ears. He chuckles, covering his mouth as he calls the situation absolutely hilarious. He grins savagely, muttering that this is truly absurd. Suddenly, a massive burst of crimson fiery mana erupts around his giant blade. He tells Arhan that he does not know what kind of tricks he used to evade his path, but now that he has shown himself, he is going to rip him to complete pieces. With a massive roar, Murphy lunges forward, swinging his giant red blade in a savage horizontal slash. His sword sweeps through the air with terrifying force, creating a massive wave of crimson energy. The crescent-shaped slash cuts right through the clearing. But Murphy's face instantly freezes in utter shock as his blade hits nothing but empty air. Before he can even recover his stance, Arhan slips past his guard with his dagger flashing in a spray of blood. With a sharp thrust, Arhan drives his blade straight through the captain's shoulder armor. Arhan leaps gracefully backward as Murphy lets out a pained scream. The bandit captain stumbles, clutching his bleeding shoulder in disbelief. He swings his sword in a blind rage, screaming at the little rat. but Arhan has already vanished into the darkness once more. Murphy realizes that no matter how incomplete his path is, this should not be possible. He panics, realizing the boy is not even deploying his own path to offset his energy. He is literally disappearing. In that split second, the assassin simply pierces right through his sensory path and slips through the gap. It feels as if the kid is tearing open a path by force. Arhan remembers his core philosophy. In carrying out his missions, he was never the strong one. Therefore, to face countless powerful enemies, he had to master the art of illusion and stealth. He had to borrow the power of his ultimate ally, the darkness itself. He waits silently in the shadows, letting the enemy search for him. The absolute prerequisite for his style was to flaunt his presence for a single second. And the moment the enemy perceives his presence and focuses their entire body senses on that spot, he completely erases everything. This sudden extreme contrast in their cognition results in the complete confusion of their five senses. In that moment of sensory overload, the enemy stands frozen, unable to react, and that is when the final decisive strike lands. The silent darkness of crowd becomes their ultimate tomb. The guard's eyes go wide as he realizes his life has already ended. He collapses to the stone floor without making a single sound. Arhan stands alone in the pitch-black corridor as the absolute master of the shadows. Back in the present, Arhan delivers another swift strike, but a sudden thought crosses his mind. He realizes something is wrong. No matter how inexperienced a swordwalker Murphy is, this battle should not be this one-sided. He looks back wondering if the captain is hiding a dangerous card. Deciding not to take any risks, Arhan slides his boots back, ready to finish this quickly. He decides to sever his windpipe before the captain can unleash his hidden power. Arhan charges forward like a lightning bolt, aiming straight for Murphy's neck, but Murphy glares at him with a furious, wide-eyed look as his survival instincts flare. Arhan gasps in shock as Murphy's heavy arm suddenly whips around, predicting his trajectory. Murphy's massive red-infused fist collides with Arhan's blade in a massive explosion of light and force. The sheer force of the collision sends Arhan flying backward with his boots sliding along the dirt. Murphy stands tall with his muscles swelling as his red aura transforms his face into a terrifying beast-like monster. The real battle has just begun. The Yellow Elephant Knights ride swiftly through the dark forest with their heavy armor clanking as they search for the deserter. One of the knights calls out, asking the vice captain if there is truly a need to gather this much elite manpower. He points out that even if the runaway dog has formed a large bandit group, expending so much of their military strength seems like far too much effort. Meccan remains silent for a moment, with his eyes hidden behind his massive steel helmet. He eventually speaks up, admitting that while the knight's concern is reasonable, the higher-ups decided that this level of force was completely appropriate. The subordinate knight looks confused, wondering why the capital would be so incredibly wary of a mere runaway. Meccan lets out a mocking, cold smile. He reveals that they had secretly sent 6 elite knights to deal with him, and every single one of them was brutally taken down. We see a chilling vision of Captain Murphy standing victorious over the bloody bodies of the fallen knights. The subordinate knight gasps in shock, unable to believe that 6 high-class knights were so easily defeated. Meccan notes that while Murphy may be an abandoned dog who hit rock bottom when it comes to killing, he is an exceptional beast. He asks the knight if he remembers Murphy's legendary alias back when he served. He was known as Berserker. Back at the camp, Arhan is completely stunned as Murphy uses his bare, monstrous teeth to catch his specialized assassin strike. With a sickening crunch, Murphy bites down hard on Arhan's dagger. With incredible bite strength, the beastly captain shatters Arhan's blade to pieces. Arhan's eye widens in absolute shock under his hood as his perfect strategy is completely shattered. Murphy swings his massive crimson-fused arm, ready to turn the little rat into paste. He delivers a colossal horizontal smash that shatters the surrounding trees. The sheer force of the impact shatters the stone ground, creating a massive explosion of dirt and debris. Arhan barely manages to roll out of the way, realizing that Murphy's power and speed have completely changed. Murphy's giant vein-bulging hand reaches down to crush him, forcing him to scramble back. A massive red aura erupts around Murphy as he lunges forward again with a savage stomp. Arhan grits his teeth, barely parrying the incoming blow with his remaining dagger. Their weapons and fists collide in a violent explosion of red and blue energy. The impact is too great, and Arhan's second blade is shattered into flying shards of steel. A swirling vortex of magical energy erupts around them, threatening to consume the entire clearing. Arhan's eyes dilate in pure shock, realizing the massive, terrifying gap between them. Murphy glares at him with savage, glowing red eyes, fully lost in his bloodlust. With a wild roar, he swings his giant red sword down, determined to end the fight. The giant blade cuts through the forest in a massive horizontal sweep. Arhan barely dodges, sliding backward across the dirt as his chest heaves in exhaustion. He pants heavily, wondering how it is possible for a simple bandit captain to possess such ferocious beast-like power. Murphy lets out a low, terrifying growl, completely losing whatever human reasoning he had left. He stands surrounded by a thick, bloody mist, having transformed into a complete berserk beast. Liam floats beside Arhan, explaining that when a swordwalker lacks conviction and is solely drunk on murder, their path manifests as a beast-like form. He explains that they lose all reasoning but exert immense physical power in return. He tells Arhan that to survive he must fully digest the memories of his dagger and complete his path. Arhan looks down at his broken weapons, taking a deep, focused breath. Several spectral blue daggers begin to manifest in the air around his hands. Liam declares that there is only one way to temper iron that has not fully matured yet, and that is to clash directly against the beast. With a wild shout, Arhan lunges forward, clashing directly against Murphy's beastly claws. Murphy swings his massive arm in a blood-red arc, trying to tear the boy to shreds. Arhan barely slides underneath the savage slash with his cloak grazing the bloody energy. He rolls on the ground, recovering his stance with incredible fluid agility. They trade a rapid flurry of blows with sparks flying through the dark camp. Arhan decides to focus entirely on defense dodging and parrying as he searches for a single weak spot. He knows that if he cannot shatter his bones, he will carve away his flesh piece by piece. The two combatants move in complete blurs of red and blue energy clashing across the camp. Murphy unleashes a devastating explosive shockwave that tears up the stone floor. But Arhan deftly weaves through the destruction, slipping inside the beast's guard. With a lightning-fast horizontal slash, he cuts directly across Murphy's torso in a flash of fresh blood. The beast captain whips around, letting out a furious scream of pure agony. He stares down at his bleeding chest, unable to believe a mere kid was able to wound him. His red eye glows with a terrifying focus, locking onto his target. He aims a sudden lightning-fast horizontal punch directly at Arhan's head. Arhan gasps in absolute shock, completely caught off guard by the beast's insane counterattack speed. Before he can even raise his guard, Murphy's massive fist lands a direct hit right on his face. The impact is brutal, sending Arhan flying backward as a massive spray of blood erupts from his mouth. He crashes through the wooden fences, creating a massive explosion of debris and dust. Arhan lies in the dirt with his clothes torn and blood dripping from his lips. He gasps, clutching his chest and admitting that a single blow from that beast almost knocked him unconscious. But as he looks at the hulking beast standing in the distance, a dangerous blue light returns to his eyes. He clenches his hands, declaring that he will definitely return this favor with interest. Murphy stands in the mist with his red eyes burning with absolute savage madness. He throws back his head, letting out a terrifying, bone-chilling roar that echoes across the mountains. The battle is entering its final, most dangerous stage. A bloody dagger clatters onto the stone floor as a splash of blood stains the dirt. Murphy clutches his bleeding left eye, groaning in sheer agony as dark blood drips through his fingers. Despite losing half his vision, his remaining red eye burns with an even more terrifying, savage intensity. He glares down at Arhan with his face twisted in absolute monstrous fury. His red aura explodes outward like a volcano, with the ground itself trembling under his feet. Arhan's hands shake violently as he clutches his broken dagger, realizing that taking the captain's eye has only made his aura more ferocious. He knows that with Murphy's savagery being proportional to his strength, taking even a single direct hit will be fatal. To make matters worse, his one remaining dagger is cracked and on the verge of breaking. Every survival instinct in his mind is screaming at him to retreat and live to fight another day. But as he stands before the beastly captain, Arhan drops into a firm, low stance. Murphy roars and charges forward with the crimson energy tearing up the earth around him. Arhan's blue eyes glow with absolute resolve, knowing he must stand his ground and fight to the bitter end. In his mind, Seolyun's tragic memories of the free city of Crowd flash before his eyes. The city of Crowd had lost its freedom, falling into absolute corruption and despair under the noble rulers. That is why someone had to willingly step forward and spill their own blood to trigger a change. Rebel fighters were captured and hung with their bodies beaten and bloodied. But even in the deepest, most hopeless abyss, without a single ray of light, they refused to succumb. A corrupt noble stands proudly on his horse, presenting the captured rebel leader to the silent crowd. The noble screams to the citizens, calling the captured rebel a murderer who deserved a wretched, miserable end. He demands that the crowd burn this horrific sight clearly into their minds. He warns them to learn how truly miserable their own ends will be if they ever dare to disrupt the order. He commands them to bow their heads and submit to power, claiming that is the only comfort allowed to them. He smiles smugly, thoroughly enjoying the crowd's silent submission. The citizens stand in tense silence, gritting their teeth in rage as they watch the platform. The noble smugly nods to the executioner to proceed. The bound rebel leader stands defiantly in front of the massive guillotine. He steps forward onto the platform with his posture calm and proud. He looks up at the sky, smiling warmly as he prepares for the end. With a loud metallic clink, the heavy blade of the guillotine comes crashing down. He screams out with his final breath, declaring that this struggle cannot end like this. His final words echo across the silent crowd. He roars that he is not afraid of dying like trash in some foul back alley, nor does he care if he is trampled to dust. The citizens listen with wide, tear-filled eyes, completely moved by his unyielding spirit. He declares that he refuses to succumb to power, choosing instead to become the darkness that resists to the bitter end. He promises to illuminate the light of freedom as the darkest darkness. His blood-stained head falls, but his words spark a sudden violent fire in the hearts of the crowd. A rebel leader steps forward, screaming for the citizens of crowd to never bow their heads. He calls for the world to see that they still have the will to fight. With a wild roar, the citizens launch a massive, coordinated rebellion against the enforcers. The streets of crowd turn into a chaotic, bloody battlefield. They slice and tear through the corrupt enforcers without a shred of hesitation. They scream that crowd will finally live up to its name as a free city once more. This is a fundamental truth that every single citizen knows in their heart. Despite many of their comrades being cut down, they refuse to back down. They charge through the blood and fire, shouting for everyone to keep moving forward. The corrupt enforcers are slowly pushed back by the sheer force of the rebellion. A rebel fighter grits his teeth, vowing to break through this thick fog of oppression. With a final massive push, they charge the noble's palace. The corrupt noble is dragged off his horse with his face pale with horror as the rebels surround him. The citizens watch in silence as the tyrant is brought to justice. The rebel leader clenches his fist, realizing they have finally reclaimed their city. The noble is executed on the very same platform where so many rebels died. His body lies silent under the dark sky as a testament to the power of the people. The wounded rebel leader looks up at his crying comrades as his breath fades. He whispers that this sacrifice was all for the sake of their precious freedom. He closes his eyes forever with a peaceful smile on his face. His comrades hold his body, weeping in both grief and victory. Under the golden morning sun, they raise their blood-stained hands, shouting his name. This city is officially their crowd. They clench their fists in solidarity, swearing to never let their freedom be stolen again. Seolyun watches them inheriting their unyielding spirit, and now that very same legendary resolve has been fully passed down to Arhan. He stares at the beast captain with his blue eyes flashing with absolute terrifying mana. He smiles, fully accepting the weight of the legacy he carries. He is the darkest darkness of crowd, the one who will carve a path of freedom. A massive vortex of blue and red spiritual energy erupts around Arhan, completely overwhelming Murphy's crimson path. He charges forward with his daggers glowing like twin stars. Murphy's eyes go wide in utter shock as he senses the sudden explosive pressure. Before he can even raise his heavy sword, Arhan's blade slices through his path like a hot knife through butter. With a clean, blindingly fast cross-slash, Arhan cuts directly through the beast captain's throat. Murphy stands completely frozen with his eyes wide in absolute terror as his path is shattered. The massive shockwave of the strike tears up the entire camp, sending debris flying into the sky. He realizes with a final chill that the boy has completely surpassed him. The giant captain collapses heavily into the dirt with his reign of terror officially ended. Arhan stands victorious in the quiet, ruined camp, having completed his very first hunt against a swordwalker. What an absolutely epic conclusion. We return to the quiet, dark forest as Arhan stands victorious amidst the ruins of the bandit camp. At his feet, Captain Murphy lies helplessly on the ground, gasping and panting as his beastly form begins to fade. Arhan lets out a long, tired sigh, wiping the blood and sweat from his face. He looks down at his broken daggers, realizing how close he came to meeting his end. But as he stands there, a sudden, warm energy begins to wrap around his body. His eyes glow with a brilliant blue light as he realizes a monumental shift has taken place inside his soul. In his mind, he sees it, a faint, straight blue line stretching across the endless darkness. A line that seemed so distant and within reach, yet always slipped away, has finally solidified. He clenches his fist tightly, feeling the incredible pure mana flowing through his veins. He has officially formed his very own path. He stands alone in the quiet, moonlit camp as the gentle wind rustles through his cloak. Liam floats beside him, proudly noting that though he is still inexperienced, Arhan can now unfold his path by his own will. He has officially reached the entry level of a swordwalker. He smiles, claiming that even as an amateur, Arhan's completed path cannot be compared to the unstable beast he just struck down. For a true caravan's path extends straight and unbreakable, refusing to bend in the face of any obstacle. A powerful blue-infused shockwave shatters the air around him. because their path is the path of steel. He explains that in the past, those who were captivated by its absolute majesty used to call their legendary path by a specific name. They called it the Lime. But as Liam continues his grand speech, Arhan's leg suddenly twitches and buckles under him. With a sudden groan, Arhan collapses face down onto the dirt, completely out of strength. Arhan pants heavily, asking why his body feels completely hollow. Liam explains it is the natural backlash of using excessive power with an untrained body. The ancestor smiles smugly, asking if he is looking forward to the brutal training that awaits him to become a mature walker. Arhan grins weakly in the mud, agreeing that while becoming a superhuman is still far out of reach, he has taken a massive step forward. He has finally forged a path that belongs entirely to him, no longer a half-baked imitation of Sir Petal. Suddenly, a bright flaming torch approaches from the dark path. Arhan looks up in surprise as a familiar voice calls out his name. Sir Petal and Soyun walk out of the dark woods with their faces filled with worry. Arhan asks why they came all the way here, completely shocked by their sudden appearance. They stand in the middle of the ruined camp, surrounded by the silent bodies of the bandits. Arhan sighs in relief, thanking Soyun for helping him recover his strength earlier. Soyun stands quietly wiping her daggers as she looks around the battlefield in absolute silence. Sir Petal looks at the piles of dead bodies, completely dumbfounded by the sheer scale of the carnage. He mutters that wiping out an entire bandit group in such a short amount of time is simply impossible for a beginner. Arhan smiles, sheepishly waving his hand and joking that luck was merely on his side today. But Sir Petal does not laugh, staring at him in deep, heavy silence. He repeats Arhan's words, completely unable to accept that luck alone could explain this. He remembers how Arhan fought knowing the boy possessed a special talent. Yet he believed that until that talent fully bloomed, it would require years of experience and training. For a mere beginner to defeat a runaway knight, he believed such a monstrous feat was only possible for the legendary bloodlines of the 5 great families. The forest wind blows softly through the quiet camp as Patel processes his thoughts. He looks at the young master, admitting that perhaps he was indeed lucky, because the protagonist of a story is not something just anyone can become. Patel smiles warmly, with his expression filled with deep respect. He adds that he finally understands why he felt compelled to come all the way to this fief. Arhan looks confused, asking what he means. Patel quickly turns around, telling him it is nothing, and urging them to head back before things get dangerous. Arhan points out that the danger is gone since the bandits are all dead, but Petal warns him that the Yellow Elephant Knight Order is likely roaming nearby to execute the traitor. Arhan asks why that would be a problem, since he spared them the trouble of hunting him down. He thinks they should be thanking him instead. Soyun crosses her arms, explaining that noble knights are bound by meaningless things like honor and pretext, and they will be enraged that someone else stole their glory. Arhan sweat drops, complaining about the twisted, ridiculous logic of knights. Liam floats next to him, chuckling, and reminding Arhan of his warning that knights are nothing but troublesome swordsmen to deal with. His eyes narrow as he adds that it seems the time has come for Arhan to experience that twisted logic firsthand. Suddenly, the ground rumbles as loud footsteps and horse hooves echo from the dark woods. A massive platoon of Yellow Elephant Knights on warhorses rides into the camp, completely surrounding them. Vice Captain Meekin stands tall on his white horse, looking down at them with complete indifference. He looks at the dead body of Murphy lying in the dirt. His eyes glow with a furious yellow light as he asks who dared to touch the runaway dog and tarnish their knighthood's honor. He screams, demanding an answer as his massive pressure washes over them. Sir Petal's sweat drops, heavily clutching his chest as the intense aura triggers his coughing. Megan warns them that there is absolutely no mercy in the march of an angry elephant, mockingly addressing Patel as sick deer. His horse takes a heavy step forward, with the ground shaking as he commands them to answer if they wish to avoid being trampled. Arhan struggles to stand with his teeth gritted as he realizes he can barely even withstand this man's passive aura. He realizes this man is an impossibly powerful figure who completely surpasses both Petal and Soyun. He panics, knowing that at this rate everyone will be slaughtered because of him, and he must resolve this somehow. But before he can speak, Sir Petal steps forward calmly. Petal looks Mekin in the eyes, declaring that he is the one who killed him. Arhan and Soyun stare at the old knight in absolute shock. Meekin looks down, asking if he heard him correctly. Petal declares his title. Petal, the Loyal of the Green Deer Knighthood, victor of 17 honor duels. He grips his cloak, standing with absolute noble dignity. He firmly repeats that he is the one who executed the runaway dog. Arhan screams in panic, asking Petal what on earth he is saying. He tries to step forward to take the blame, but Soyun gently holds his hand to keep him back. Arhan looks at her in shock, but she slowly shakes her head silently, telling him to let Patel protect his honor. She keeps her eyes closed, showing her respect for the old knight's final noble decision. Mekin smiles mockingly, noting that, as one who has taken a knight's oath, Patel must know what this tarnish means. He claims that a washed-up relic abandoned by his master has openly sullied the honor of the yellow elephant. His knights draw their weapons ready for blood. Mechan's smile turns incredibly cruel and savage. He unleashes a massive, crackling yellow aura, declaring that, as vice captain, he cannot overlook this disrespect. He officially challenges Sir Petal to an honor duel. Sir Petal stands tall, surrounded by a peaceful, glowing green aura. With absolute dignity, he accepts the challenge. What a heart-wrenching, epic cliffhanger. We open with a solemn explanation of the ancient sacred tradition known as the honor duel. It is a duel where combatants wager absolutely everything under the pretext of correcting those who have sullied their honor. The winner regains all of their lost honor, significantly raising their prestige as a knight. However, the loser is stripped of all dignity with their lifeless corpse displayed publicly as a warning to all. For proud knights who value honor far more than their own lives, this public humiliation is a punishment infinitely worse than death. Therefore, an honor duel is rarely arranged, and it is even more unprecedented between combatants with a significant gap in skill. But as Mechan rides off under the full moon, his face is twisted in a savage, arrogant smile. Sir Petal stands outside the gates, watching the dust settle as the elite knights vanish into the dark forest. He stands in silence with his expression completely calm and resigned. Arhan walks up behind him with his face pale with shock as he demands to know why Petal did something so incredibly foolish. He points out that the vice captain's golden aura is the undeniable proof of a sword runner, a powerhouse on a completely different level. He reminds Petal that even under normal circumstances, a swordwalker cannot hope to defeat a runner. And, in his current condition, Petal's body can barely even move properly without coughing up blood. Arhan screams in absolute frustration, asking how on earth he plans to fight such an impossible opponent. He reminds him of their very first conversation, where Petal admitted he wanted to spend his final days in quiet peace. Petal had wished only to quietly watch the campfire and spend his last breathless days on his own terms. But now he has chosen to wager not just his failing body but his entire life's honor as well. Arhan begs him to reconsider, pleading for him to tell the knights he is withdrawing from the duel. The cold forest wind rustles through the clearing as they stand in silence. Petal looks back with a gentle smile, thanking the young master for caring about him this much. But he explains that to a true knight there are sometimes things infinitely more important than victory or honor. He wishes to stand tall before a powerful enemy at least once in his final moments. He grips his cloak, wanting to be someone who does not yield to fear and someone who protects his neighbors. He wants to live and die like the brave protagonists in the old knight novels he loved. He smiles, claiming that perhaps God took pity on his impending death and granted him this final opportunity to shine. Arhan grits his teeth with tears of sheer frustration welling in his eyes as Petal begs for his blessing. Arhan bites his lips so hard it bleeds, completely overwhelmed by his own helplessness. Without saying another word, Arhan turns and walks away into the dark forest with his heart heavy. Seoyun silently follows behind him, leaving Sir Patel alone in the courtyard. Patel watches them go, whispering a soft apology to the young master. The next morning, the yellow elephant banners wave proudly over their massive white military encampment. Inside the main tent, Senior Knight Ron approaches his captain with a serious expression. Vice Captain Meekin sits casually on his bench, slowly polishing his heavy blade. Ron asks if he truly had to go as far as arranging an honor duel with Petal. Mechan calmly confirms his decision, but Ron points out that Patel's body is already completely consumed by disease. He insists that even if left alone, the old veteran would barely survive another fortnight. He clenches his fist, pointing out that in a week, Petal will be a walking corpse, struggling to even stand. Mechan glares at him, asking if Ron truly believes there is nothing to gain from cornering such a man. Mechan's smile turns dark and menacing. He stands up, sheathing his sword, as he asks Ron how much he actually knows about Petal the Loyal. His yellow eyes glow with a terrifying intensity as he claims he knows the old veteran very well. Back at the academy, Patel was mocked as an idiot with zero talent who only knew how to foolishly try hard. Everyone predicted he would die in his first battle. But despite their mockery, Petal reached the pinnacle of a swordwalker and survived countless battlefields. For the sake of his lord, he emerged victorious in 17 grueling honor duels. He protected his master even when the battlefield was rained with devastating magic bombardments. And when 500 starving refugees swarmed the castle, he defended the gates completely alone. He truly deserved the moniker of Petal the Loyal. Mechan warns that because of those firm convictions, Petal's existence is incredibly dangerous to their order. His golden, raging aura of a swordrunner begins to crackle around him. He clenches his fist, claiming Petal's conviction is as dangerous to him as his own wings. He savagely grins, declaring that once the duel is over, he will tie Petal's corpse to a wagon and drag it back to his village. He promises to trample on his corpse in front of everyone, completely extinguishing whatever honor he has left. His golden energy flares like massive wings, filling the entire tent with blinding light. He looks at Ron, asking if he still thinks there is nothing to gain from this execution. Ron stands silent, completely repulsed by his captain's psychopathic cruelty. Mekin continues to grin, lost in his own twisted ambition. Back at the mansion, Arhan sits quietly in his room as the gray clouds gather outside. He clutches his hands with his head lowered as his mind races. Liam floats beside him, coldly stating the reality of the situation. Petal will die. He explains that none of Petal's past glory matters, because in a duel between a walker and a runner, there is absolutely zero chance of victory. Arhan grits his teeth as the agonizing truth tears at his soul. Liam asks why he has grown so attached to that night. Arhan whispers that Petal's choice reminds him of his father. His father also chose to stand his ground and fight an enemy he could never defeat, defending his home to the very end. He clenches his fists, claiming he absolutely hates seeing arrogant strong people trample on the weak. And what is even more agonizing is his own weakness, forcing him to simply stand by and watch. He looks completely shattered, weeping in his silent room. Liam asks if he is willing to let his chance to obtain a walker's sword slip further away just to save him. Arhan screams in fury, claiming he does not care about the sword at all. He looks at his daggers, asking what meaning there is in turning a blind eye to this tragedy just to protect his own safety. He roars that revenge gained through such a cowardly choice means absolutely nothing. He sits with his head lowered, confessing how much he hates himself for once thinking he could easily exploit Petal's sword. He regrets his own foolishness for not seeing what truly needed to be protected. Liam stands beside him, looking down at his descendant with a proud, warm expression. He smiles, declaring that a sword is ultimately nothing more than a blade, and he cannot call himself a caravan if he lets himself be buried in such petty greed. Arhan looks up with his blue eyes glowing with a renewed, deadly resolve. Liam tells him that the only path to protecting everyone is to step forward.